Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Connor.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio 158. It's the 2nd of May. Dennis Graff here with Kasper Ozolowski. On a very chilly Melbourne morning, we are sort of transitioning into a cold winter. Things are pretty depressing, we're not going to lie. But we have a sexy show. It's kind of like the bright beacon, the light in a lot of people's lives here in the cold, cold weather. We're going to get you guys through there like potatoes in Russia. Very important for survival. We have some important potatoes, Kasper, on the show. I also got my Conan t-shirt here. I
love that.
You and me both love Conan. Just quickly, before we get into the guests, some of your favorite Conan clips. I know you showed me the one where he goes to the baby doll shop thing.
Yeah, there's that one. Yeah, there's the one where it's like a doll, and the dolls are like high priced and fancy, and they all have names, and they have these crazy backstories. One of the dolls, it's like her father gets killed, and it's in the 1950s, and Conan just destroys it. He's like, these dolls are very violent, and then, he starts like pretending like the doll can talk, and, then she's got like Nazi attitudes to her. He's like, she's from Germany. And anything to do with Jordan Schlansky. If you're not on the Jordan Schlansky train, you are wasting your life. I make that very clear. Conan and Jordan Schlansky, they recently went to Italy. He's like a producer or something. No one knows what Jordan Schlansky really does. Socially very awkward. Conan destroys him, and hilarity ensues. So, yeah.
That's a good one. And then also the Tinder one with Franco. Him and Franco jump in a van.
That's good.
And meet up with some Tinder dates.
Yeah.
Some good stuff. So make sure to check that stuff out, guys. But anyway, some hot potatoes on Submission Radio today, Cass.
I love how you're describing this show as a survival tool, comparing to potatoes in Russia. I think that may be the case, because it's freezing here. I'm not going to lie, it's chilly, and my heater right now is broken, so I'm very upset about that. And I don't know why I'm in a t-shirt, but it is very cold. But hey, who better to warm you up than Bas Rutten, huh? A nice slice of Bas Rutten on Submission Radio, coming back this time in video form, which I'm very, 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 very excited for, because we've had Bas Rutten always on audio, always kind enough to join us on Skype, and sometimes before the interview starts, he gives us a sneak peek. He's like, look, I'm on my patio, look, I'm in my office, look, I'm here, there. And then we're all like, all right, shut the video down, Bas. We love it, but the show is like stuck in the 1800s. Now that we're in the future, Bas Rutten on video. Got to get his thoughts on, obviously, the Fedor win. The man commentated how many Fedor fights in Pride. So got to get his thoughts on that. Got to get his thoughts on a whole bunch of things. I'm very, very, very excited. I'm jonesing to be speaking to Bas Rutten. We got Ryan Bader, another man coming off this Bellator 198 momentum. Talking about Fedor Emelianenko, talking about the win, talking about Chael Sonnen. He's got a bit of a beef there. Chael Sonnen is making some mean videos about Ryan Bader. We want Ryan Bader to talk about that. He's obviously facing King Mo in this bracket, in this heavyweight Grand Prix that Bellator has got, so there's a lot to talk about there. Jon Anik joining us. It's been a while since he's been on the program, so we want to talk about a whole bunch of things. Want to get his thoughts on that TV deal. There's some funny rumors going on this morning that Nate Diaz is interested potentially in returning at UFC 227. Nick Diaz, who should he face? There's a whole bunch of fun stuff to talk to Jon Anik about his gambling. He likes to gamble. He likes to make bets, likes to make tattoo bets. So we've got to get an update on that. Also, Colby Covington. How could I wait so long to tell you guys that Colby Covington is on the program? Not only is he facing Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 225 for the interim UFC welterweight belt, but he got into a bit of an altercation with Charles Felony Bennett. Not Crazy Horse. He's not Crazy Horse anymore. Charles Felony Bennett over the weekend at CamSoda Legends, an event basically run by a porn website. And he's been hanging out with porn stars as well, old Colby Covington. So there's a lot to talk to Colby about there. And of course, Karim the Dream coming back to the program. Who better to talk to about Russian MMA, about all the things that are going on in the Eastern Bloc, about leaders, about oligarchs, about dictators, and of course about Fedor Emelianenko. Maybe ask a couple of questions about Khabib and things like that. And I can't wait, man. It's going to be a really, really, really fun show, isn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. Follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. Man, I got to tell you, it's good to sort of give somebody a place to go to get away from this royal wedding madness. I don't know about what's going on in the country that you guys are listening in. I don't know if it's big in America, but here in Australia, and I'm guessing over in the United Kingdom, it's on TV all the time. I mean, who gives a crap? I'm sorry, but who gives a crap about this royal wedding. It's on TV all the time. There's specials every single night. Oh, well, what kind of dress will they be wearing? What kind of cake will they have? Will there be a celebrity? Who cares if Ed Sheeran is at the wedding? We have more important things to do. So if you were trying to get away from this, trying to get away from the royal wedding, look, we love Meghan. We love Meghan. I love Meghan.
God,
I watch the Suits. But I'm the only one who's mad at Harry or whatever that guy's name is for pulling her away from my favorite show to get married. I mean, Meghan, she was great in Suits. Her and Mike Ross, that's the real relationship going on. Now they break them up. Mike Ross might be leaving Suits. What's going on? Who's going to pay the price for ruining my show? Because I know Harry's going around, doing half an hour chat at a charity once in a while, and that's what Meghan's going to be doing. It's like Nate Diaz in his prime not fighting. Get her back into Suits. That's unbelievable.
We should get Harry on and ask him who Nate Diaz should fight.
We should get Harry on and ask him to move on. Get married to someone else. What about one of the lesser characters from Suits that I don't care about never seeing again? Lewis Litt. Marry Lewis Litt. Jessica Pearson, I'm sick of her face. Marry her. She's getting a spin-off show. No, Meghan should be getting the spin-off show, damn it. It's all over the news. It's all over TV. It's all over the newspapers. All the celebrities are running in. Right? Oh, I hope I get invited to the wedding. Who cares? Weddings are overrated. I had to do 2 weddings recently, Casper. I'm weddinged out. You got to do that on a large scale. You want to go? You want to go to this wedding? You're a celebrity. You have nothing better to do. Submission Radio's here. We have an episode of Submission Radio. Listen to Submission Radio. This is everybody who can't watch TV right now. And let's be honest, we can't because it's all over the channels. I don't know what it's like for you guys in America, but apparently it's all over the channels there. This is your sanctuary away from the trash that is the royal wedding.
Except for the last 3 minutes that we spent talking about it.
This guy is never going to become king. So what I'm doing right here, Casper, I'm standing up for all the people because no one has said this. I haven't seen one person say, fuck the royal wedding. Fuck the royal wedding, everybody. This guy's never going to become king. You know what it is? It's like if you have a friend and okay, listen, weddings are fine. Me and Casper, weddings are fine. I can't stand when I go to a wedding and I see people, oh, I love you so much. I can't wait to have the children we haven't already had yet. I can't wait to build that. Come on, man. It's all bullshit. Now you got to see that on a grand scale every single time. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe let Conor McGregor attend that wedding. I don't know. He usually goes
throw
up
a dolly. Does anybody object? Boom, dolly flies out of nowhere.
Maybe that's the way to make things right. Get him to go to the wedding, sort things out. Anyway, it's a fun show here on Submission Radio, guys.
Just quickly, could you imagine it? That the wedding's going on, they're talking about the king, and then you hear the fucking Burger King is here, and then Conor McGregor comes out. See, I'd watch that wedding.
What I want to see is Stone Cold. I want the glass to break. I want Stone Cold Steve Austin to go down the aisle, damn it, and start up Prince Harry. I mean, he's never going to become king. Unbelievable. I think there's some crazy
Stone Cold cuts a promo. You think you're going to be king? Think you're going to marry Meghan? Something. Shot of whiskey. Shot of tequila. Does the Stone Cold hands. Bam. Stunner. Out of there.
He should ride around to the ATV. Then it goes dark. The Undertaker comes out and takes Prince Harry out with a tombstone.
Steals Meghan.
Mean, look, I'm happy with it. Like, even get Covington down there.
Yes.
Know? Just get someone down there to finish this thing up. It's ridiculous. At least, it's unbelievable. Anyway, guys, we have a fun show for you. If you don't like the wedding, it's okay. We understand.
Tweet us and tell us how much you dislike the wedding and how much hopefully you enjoy the show.
He's never going to become king. He's never going to become king. Okay, if he was going to be king next, that's a deal. But he's got his brother's kids. It's a whole thing going on. So you know what? Just why do you have to be on TV all the time? It's too much for me. I don't like it. Go on ABC or SBS. Nothing against those channels, but no one really watches them too much anyway. No, they're great channels. There's a lot of great public access on there. Look, if Submission Radio was ever going to have a TV show, it probably just ruined the only chance of getting on TV. Yeah. Because they're the only ones that will accept us. But, I mean, just get rid of the wedding. That's all we have to say. End it now. With enough Diana documentaries as well. No offense. I know she's not around. It was horrible what happened. But do we have to be reminded? And do there have to be 1,000 books and butlers doing exposés about she was wearing a red hat on a Saturday? It's like, we don't want to know about her hat. We don't want to know about her hat. He was on Celebrity. Okay, this is true. He was on Celebrity Get Me Out of Here in Australia.
Who, the butler?
Butler was okay. The celebrity, I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. They're like, we have a big reveal for you guys. It's the butler that served. That was the big reveal. I'm not shitting people in America. That was our celebrity. Get me out of here.
Wow.
They should have changed that show to Get Me Out of Here.
They should have changed it. They should have changed it to the butler from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now there's a butler.
Now that's a butler. I want to see the butler from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the butler from The Nanny. Get all the butlers in there, but this butler from this Diana Butler. Who is this butler? Unbelievable. Anyway, guys, a big show of Submission Radio coming up. Casper mentioned it, a great lineup. Oh, I think we've got our first guest on the line, and Casper, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is set to take on King Mo in the quarterfinals of the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix on May 12th. He is the current Bellator Light Heavyweight Champion, Ryan Darth Bader. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It's great to have you on again, man. No less in your home on video.
There we go, right? Stepping it up.
Looking very good. Now, let's get straight into it, because looking at your Instagram, sir, we have to start with the most important question of all. Who bought you the penis towel?
Oh, we've had that forever. It was from a show called Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They had a little episode, and we've had it forever. So we'll get in the pool, and the kids sometimes will just grab a towel and they'll wrap it around themselves, and they'll have it. So we got to be careful with that, but yeah, it's pretty funny.
It's awesome. For those who haven't seen it, it's basically like a white towel with a cartoon drawing of a naked lower body and this massive penis. I mean, look, small by Submission Radio standards, small by Ryan standards, but you know, big cartoon penis. Do you like, okay, when the kids aren't wearing it, do you just wear it around the house, or do you ever take it outside, like to the beach or, you know, somewhere else, to the gym maybe?
I would definitely take it to the gym. I haven't taken it to the beach yet. It might be a little too much, but it does have a little smaller size on the other side. So you want to feel good about yourself, you throw that one on.
The Bellator weigh-ins. Maybe Bellator weigh-in. Maybe you can give it to King Mo and just mess with him.
There we go.
That's what they need to do. Like when a fighter is like, you know, right on the edge and they need to take off the underwear, they whip out that towel just to mess with everybody.
Oh, yeah,
and depending on what they like them, they give the big dick towel or the small dick towel.
I think everybody at that point dehydrated gets a small dick towel side.
Yeah. And then of course the female variation, and then maybe some of the guys get the female one, some of the girls get the male one, just to mix it up a little bit. That way you get more viewers to these weigh-ins. I feel like we're coming up with new ideas for Scott Coker to get some solid ratings for the next weigh-ins. Yeah. But in all seriousness, looking at the back of this past weekend, what did you think of Fedor's big win over Frank Mir?
I loved it. You know, I like both of them, but for me, selfishly, I would want to fight Fedor in the finals, and so to see him go out there and win, you know, I like seeing that. You know, for me, the perfect ending to the Grand Prix would be going out there beating Fedor, not only for the heavyweight belt, but doing it in a Grand Prix style tournament. So I was glad to see him win, and then you know, I got to do my part.
And there's a bit of history there, because obviously you coming from The Ultimate Fighter Season 8, that was the season Frank Mir and Nogueira, so you would have known Mir a little bit. Were you worried, you know, for Fedor a bit and your hopes of meeting him in the finals when Frank came out sort of heavy at the start and, you know, looked to do some damage to Fedor?
Yeah, he looked good too at the weigh-ins. He was pretty shredded. He's over 260, you know, 260 whatever, and he looked good. And you know, I thought Mir was going to go out there and with his weight and his striking, you know, and his ground, just be too much for Fedor. But we saw a little Fedor from the old days come out throwing bombs and caught him. And, you know, he had a good judo, you know, sweep there, little trip there on the fence. And then, yeah, they were just, you know, Fedor was just throwing, you know, his chin up and just letting him go. So caught Mir a couple of times and put him out. So I was going into that fight thinking Mir was going to win, though.
Well, what did you make of the moment when Chael got in the cage and got in Fedor's face? I mean, it always kind of looked serious at first, but then Fedor went for the handshake and shattered any illusion or animosity that Chael Sonnen was trying to build there. What did you think of that moment? It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it was funny, you know, and Fedor just kind of shut him down. You know, and Chael did one of his corny poems or whatever he does there, and Fedor really wasn't having it. So, you know, Chael's going to do that and it's good. I think it's good. If he can get people watching, and that's an intriguing matchup. Chael can definitely go out there and beat him. So it's one of those fights that it's a toss-up. Fedor can go out there and look good and knock him out, or Chael can take him down and dominate him in that wrestling department. So we'll see.
Are you sort of looking at this as a 50-50 fight? Because I think a lot of people kind of think, they look at the Vanderlei fight, and Vanderlei caught Chael with some big bombs at some moments, but Vanderlei's never really been known for having that, elite wrestling, whereas Fedor, he's got, not only does he have the Sambo, he's got the wrestling, but he's also really good on the ground and off his back. So do you think it's a 50-50 fight, or are you sort of leaning towards Fedor on this one a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's a toss-up, because people always underestimate Chael, and he'll talk a lot, do all that, but he does have the tools to win. You look back to his fights with guys like Shogun, where he does have a good guillotine also, and he can take people down. He has decent striking where he can keep you at distance, like he did with Rampage, and then pick his shots where he's going to take you down. And he doesn't necessarily have to take you down and pass and try to submit you. He's going to take you down. He's going to just be on top of you. He's got that good control. He doesn't have to do much damage. It's a 3-round fight also. You got to take that into account. So you can go out there and take him down and hold him down for 3 rounds and win the fight and move on to the finals. Yeah. And Fedor obviously can land those big bombs. And what Fedor does really well, has always done, is he throws those right hands and left hooks with bad intentions, even though if they're coming from the hip. Mm-hmm. He's got some power behind him, and he knows how to use his body to generate even more power behind those punches.
Yeah, of course. And just sort of going back to Chael, it seems like you managed to piss him off a little bit. We saw a video that you reposted on Instagram of a little clip. What did you make of his reaction to you saying that, you said that he'd build that fight. He seemingly took offense to that, and he's basically saying that he's going to shove a belt up your ass. What was your reaction to that?
And then he's doing exactly what I said he would do.
Yeah.
No, he does that with everybody though. You just saw that with Fedor. He went in there and tried to do one of his lines, and he's playing that role, and he got booed out of there, and he wants to play that heel and the bad guy, and it's entertaining and people like it. So he said something that he was offended that I said something in an interview, and it is what it is. If he makes it to the finals, and then it's going to be one of those things where I'm rooting for Fedor, because that would be the storybook ending to this tournament. But if Chael's in there, even better. It doesn't matter. And so I'll do my thing in there in the cage like I have been, and look forward to it.
I mean, when looking at that matchup with Chael, a lot of people would say that, probably heavily lean towards you, seeing as, you're in your prime, you're a great wrestler, and you probably negate a lot of the strengths that Chael's got. How do you see that matchup going, you and Chael?
Yeah, his big thing is when he gets in trouble, he's able to take people down, and I don't think he's going to be able to do that with me. And I'm going to be throwing hard at him. And, I'm in the absolute prime of my career right now. I feel like I'm just getting into it. Perfect timing for this tournament. And I train my butt off still, where I don't think some of these guys do. I'm in there 2-3 times a day. I'm training harder than I was when I was 23 years old, and
wow.
My cardio was always there, so if we're in that fight, and it's a 5-round fight, I have the power, I have the striking, and then if he can't take me down, it's going to be a long night, and we will see, the Chael that's fought those wrestlers before, like the Rashad Evans of the world, etc. So, it's one of those things where, like I said, I'd love Fedor to make it, but if Chael makes it, it's just as good.
Mm. Well, here's a thought. I mean, you've mentioned the storybook ending, you versus Fedor, but like, if you beat Fedor, like, you're already the light heavyweight champion. If you beat Fedor, arguably, the GOAT at heavyweight, and then you win the Bellator heavyweight belt, you're a dual champion. Can anything else top that? Like, it's almost a case of what else would you do in your career? Like, you would have climbed the pinnacle, Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do. I know what you're saying, but I mean, I always look at it as what's next, even, go out there, win the light heavyweight title. All right, what do I have next? All right, how can I look better? That moment in my career when I'm standing in there and I have the heavyweight belt and I'm the current light heavyweight champion also, You know, and it doesn't matter if I beat Fedor or Sonnen, you know, that definitely will be, you know, a highlight for sure. That'd be one of the best nights in my, you know, in my career, obviously. But, and then for me, immediately I'll be thinking, all right, what's next? Am I defending the heavyweight belt? Am I defending the light heavyweight belt? You know, how long can I keep these? You know, those kind of thoughts. So, yeah, it'll be the pinnacle, it'll be the top, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give them back and go home. You know, I'm going to go out there and keep doing what I'm doing, defend both. So, you know, that's the plan. But first and foremost, got to go out there and make it there. You know, I got to go out and beat Mo. Then I got to go out and beat Mitrione. And I think we have definitely the tougher side of the bracket here.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, I mean, you mentioned Mo and Mitrione. Who do you think is the tougher test out of both of them? Because Mitrione, he's a big guy. You know, so he's got the strength, he's got the size. Whereas King Mo, he's a veteran. He's been in there with a lot of really tough guys. Yeah.
Well, they're both tough, and they're both different. You know, Mo likes to box. He definitely has his wrestling, where Mitrione is a big guy. He's athletic. He's really slick and fast on his feet. But his wrestling department lacks a little bit, and his cardio lacks a little bit. Two aspects where I'm great at, you know. And so, what I did like about this tournament right away is different stylistic matchups that every single fight had. Every fighter in here is different, you know. And so, for me coming into this fight, you know, I feel like I do the things that he does well. I think I do them better. You look at the guys I've fought, you know, if we're going to go back and be like, oh, he's a veteran, he's this. I've consistently fought top 10 guys. I can't tell you the last time I haven't fought a top 10 guy, regardless of promotion. You know, and I'm in there, I'm 9-1 in my last 10 fights, you know, and then he's beat and he's fought great guys, but, you know, he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. You know, his big win was against Rampage, just about got beat by Sonnen, you know, not taking anything away from him at all. He's a tough competitor, but if we sit there and stack resumes and compare them, I know that doesn't mean shit, but I'm consistently in there with the top guys, regardless of promotion, and I'm beating them, you know. And so for me, I got to go in there and just do my thing, do what I've been doing the last, you know, couple of years, and I'm there mentally, physically, and it's one of those things where I got to go in there and implement my game. And if I do that, it's going to be a good night.
And speaking of physically, I mean, there's going to be some big guys in this competition, this tournament. What are you looking at in terms of the weight that you're going to be coming in at? Obviously, you don't have to cut weight. Are you looking to build some muscle? Is there a target weight that you're sort of looking at to come in so the bigger guys don't have too much of an advantage when it comes to throwing the weight around in strength? What kind of Ryan Bader will we be seeing here?
Yeah, I'm about 233 right now. You know, I'll fight around there, 230. You know, so for me, that's good. There's one heavyweight left in this tournament. You know, true heavyweight. That's Mitrione. You know, Mo's probably the smallest guy I've ever fought at light heavyweight. You know, Sonnen's a middleweight, light heavyweight, and then Fedor is a smaller heavyweight. You know, so for me, it's keeping what makes me good. What, you know, my cardio I feel is, you know, some of the best in the light heavyweight division, you know, let alone a heavyweight division. So I want to keep that. I want to keep my quickness. I want to keep my ability to move and be quick and be unpredictable. And so I don't want to put on 15 pounds and be a big sluggish heavyweight. You know, I want to keep what makes me good in there. So the weight thing is not really an issue at all. I'm really not trying to do anything in particular. I kept my strength training throughout this camp. I won't have to cut that 15 pounds, you know, Wednesday, Thursday of fight week, you know, so I'm about 10 pounds heavier, you know, 7 to 10 pounds than what I would have been if I'm fighting at light heavyweight at this point with the fight coming up in, you know, a week and a half or whatnot.
Wow. And you've also spoken to us in the past about how you're sort of more likely to let things go in the cage when there's less pressure on you, you know, money being one of the factors. Is this sort of even more so for you? Because seeing as, you know, you're competing above your natural weight class and technically, you know, a loss wouldn't really affect your standings at 205. You've obviously got a lot to sort of, you know, gain, but does this kind of, I guess, make you relax in a sense and make you sort of feel like you can express yourself better in the cage than maybe, you know, if you're at 205 chasing that title?
Yeah, for sure. You know, and in I think I'd be fighting him at light heavyweight anyway, regardless if this fight didn't happen with this heavyweight tournament.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-rounder also. I've been fighting 5-rounders, preparing for 5-rounders, and there's a different pace you got to be able to keep and put on yourself if you're fighting potentially 5 rounds. If you come out gangbusters for the first round, I feel confident I can keep going. But you always have that in the back of your mind. 3-rounder, I feel like I can do 3 rounders no problem at the pace I want to keep the whole time. Fast pace, in your face, so that's going to be something I'm looking forward to. And then, it's kind of frees you up a little bit from pace structure to coming to this tournament. It's a heavyweight tournament. I'm outside of my normal division. It's a 3-round fight. I think all of those together will allow me to come out there, be relaxed, and let it all go.
You look like you're having fun. Like, I remember when you first went over to Bellator, some of the stuff that we spoke about on the show was, your ability to do stuff like this, be a part of these tournaments, be a bit freer in what you're doing. Are you sort of enjoying your experience with Bellator thus far? Yeah,
for sure. I've been fought on the bigger cards. I'm fighting on another big card here. That's one thing we talked about coming over. We wanted to be on those marquee cards. I fought in Madison Square Garden of all places in my first fight there. So came in, to a huge card, huge venue, and so I'm having a great time. I'm having a great time with the people, the behind the scenes people in Bellator. The staff there, the digital team, the marketing team. They do fun stuff. Just feel more free and able to be myself. And it's I wouldn't say it's less pressure, but it's fight week is exactly the same as I'm used to, but everybody's more relaxed. You can talk to them, and I just feel like it's just less pressure put on myself. And so when I have that, I'm able to go out there and do what I do and not think about too many external things. And that could be just being a couple extra fights and experience also.
Well, before we get your prediction for this fight, because we're very excited to see it happen, want to quickly get your thoughts on your the ex-place where you used to work, the UFC. There's a big heavyweight fight between Stipe and DC. DC, a guy that you know well. How do you think that matchup plays out? Because a lot of people are sort of trying to figure out who's going to win here, if DC is going to be able to do it, or if Stipe is going to keep his streak alive.
Yeah, it's a tough one. My gut says Cormier. I think he's going to go out there and be smart. And they're both good wrestlers, but I think Cormier is on that different level of wrestling. It does some different stuff that you're not used to, with his head outside on that single and everything. And I feel like he's going to tap out a lot. And then, Stipe has good cardio, but I think he's just kind of going to wear on Stipe a little bit. But that being said, he's on a tear. He's confident. Talking about Stipe here, he's big and athletic, and he can knock you out with either hand too. So it's just one of those fights. I think it's whoever gets in there and starts implementing their game. DC would be the wrestling and making them work, and then I think Stipe is kind of staying away and start landing shots on them. So if it's a tough, I have no idea, but if you could ask me, I would say Cormier.
Sure. You mentioned confidence there. Just wondering, from your perspective, a fighter's perspective, how much of a factor is that sort of going to a fight, and how much realistically do you think that sort of plays out in fights? Guys who are, say, on big streaks, who go in with all this confidence versus, guys who may be not so much down in the dumps, but maybe sort of looking at it as if they're facing adversity. Like, have you felt a difference in your performances in your career, say, when you've been on a big streak and you've been full of confidence versus maybe when you were rebounding from a loss?
Yeah, I think it's that doubt is gone. When you have a loss or you have 2 losses, there's only one time in my career where I've had 2 losses back to back, and that doubt is there. I'm a little too much, and you're like, all right, how do I have to fight this fight to win, to get back on the winning side? And, when you have a string of wins and you're doing the right things, and everything's falling together and you're winning, and you haven't changed anything and you're keeping with that formula, you go in there with the most confidence in the world. And in that fight, it shows. Even if you're getting beat up a little bit, you're like, oh, I'll make this up right here. And then I think it's just that mental mental aspect where you come off a couple of losses and you're like, oh man, I gotta get this win, and things start going bad, and so you start looking for a home run punch or whatnot, and so that confidence coming in, you're the man, you've stopped these guys, you're on a streak, and then you just bring that energy and that determination and the mental fortitude into a fight, when you have that going on.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of that going on to this fight. Let's quickly get the prediction right. How do you see yourself beating King Mo in this upcoming fight?
King Mo's a little tricky. He's got a different stance. He's quick and all that, and I think it's going to take a little bit to figure him out. But I do think there's going to be a stoppage, with my hands, either on the feet or on the ground. I think I'm going to go out there. I feel confident. My cardio is where it's never been before, in a good place, and I just feel like, I'm going to take more risks and land stuff that he's not going to be able to withstand.
And you must be excited about not having to do a weight cut as well.
Yeah.
That must be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I don't cut a ton of weight, but still, I'm taking 15 pounds of water out of my body on Wednesday and Thursday, on Friday morning. And trying to get that back in, so to not have to do that, I'm excited to see how I'll feel in that cage, because, taking out that water, even though, it's not 30 pounds or whatnot, like some of these guys are cutting, it still affects you somehow, and so for me, I get to, keep on my routine, eat, drink, all the way up to the fight, go in there like I do in every day in training and sparring, and I know how I feel there, which is great. And so I'm excited to, walk into that cage feeling like that, feeling confident already, and go in there and get that win and look to the next fight and look to the rest of the tournament.
Well, there you go, guys. And we're excited to see you face King Mo. Ryan Bader versus King Mo at Bellator 199 takes place at May 12th. It's going to be May 13th here in Australia and New Zealand. Of course, winner moves on to face Matt Mitrione. And then possibly the storybook ending for Ryan Bader. Him and Fedor in the finals. We'll have to wait and see. Don't forget to follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at Ryan Bader. If you like funny pictures with towels and cartoon penises, and of course training and a whole bunch of other things as well. So, Ryan, thank you so much for your time, man. Always appreciate it. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, guys. It's Stipe Miocic, UFC heavyweight champion, and you listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is the UFC's lead play-by-play commentator. When he's not doing a tremendous job in the commentary booth, he's sharing the excellent insight and analysis he has on the Anik and Florian podcast, which you should all be listening to if you're not. One of the few men brave enough to get 209 tattooed on himself. He is Jon Anik. Jon, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you today, man?
I appreciate that, man. Always good to be with you. I'm doing well, thank you.
And we're happy to have you on the show. Obviously, you had a well-deserved holiday with your family recently. We have to ask, we know how crazy your schedule usually is. What does Jon Anik and his family usually do when you have some rare time off in between some big events?
Well, it's really whatever my daughters want to do. They sort of lead the dance, as anyone who has children knows. Life one gives way to life two. They call the shots. But, the nice thing about living in South Florida is that we can do a little staycation and go to Miami or Fort Lauderdale, not far from where we live. And even going to a hotel for a night feels special for them. So anything to get away, and we never complain about the weather down here. But I don't know, man. I think for a lot of fans, and for myself included, when we go 2 or 3 weeks without a UFC show, I'm jonesing to get back out on the road and get back to it. So as much as I like the downtime, sometimes, I want them to send me my Rio de Janeiro voiceovers. I'm ready to go, So it goes both ways, but definitely nice to have a couple bye weeks here in late April.
See, that's when you know you're doing an amazing job, and you've got a great job when you're actually looking forward to coming back to work. Because most people, they don't look forward to going back to work. So you're one of the lucky people in the world that he gets to do. We heard a rumor though that when you first signed on to be a part of the UFC, it was sort of going to be a much lighter schedule. It was mainly going to be like a sort of weekly hosting gig, and you were going to be hosting some of the UFC's programming, and then pretty quickly it turned into, no, you're going to be a commentator, you're going to be doing it full time. Is there any truth to that?
Not really. I mean, I think they had a lot of different balls in the air as to what they wanted me to do. Certainly the Ultimate Fighter at one point in time was going to be a cornerstone to what I was hired to do, because they were going to take show live, of course, as you guys know, as they did for one season, and too bad that went away. But no, I mean, this was a play-by-play job when I took it, and I knew they were going to be essentially doubling their schedule and giving me, you know, probably 40 or 50% of the events right out of the chute. And that was really the appeal for me. As I've said a lot, you know, I wasn't getting the live event repetitions at ESPN that I was craving. I mean, I was doing remotes, I was doing desk shows, but I wasn't getting to call sporting events. And that was the big draw with the UFC gig as it was presented in 2011. So I'm sort of glad the job has gone the way it has. It's hard to believe that I didn't sit on a TV desk in 2017 at all, which is the first time probably 8 or 10 years that's been the case. So that'll be an adjustment if they call my number again. But I like the way it's played out, and hopefully we continue, you know, down this path.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you and Joe obviously make an amazing team. We also, you know, Joe was sort of throwing up whether or not he's going to stick around, and then he saw that fight and he was really amped up and he wanted to stick around. But you mentioned how you've obviously commentated other sports. Do you have any goals in the future to maybe, once you're done with MMA, go back to commentating other sports? Do you ever get that itch, like when there's a break in MMA and you say you miss doing UFC? Do you ever watch a sport that you love and go, man, I wish I could be commentating this as well? I kind of miss this as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, basketball was my first love. So if I got an opportunity to do a basketball game, college or pro, not that anyone's calling my number this weekend, I would enjoy doing that because I think it would be a relatively easy flow because I know the game as well as any other. But I think for a lot of American fans, sports fans, it's the NFL, and the NFL is king. And that has always been the case for me. I mean, the UFC is certainly right there. And I feel like mixed martial arts, as I probably said to you guys, when it's at its best, I don't think any sport can touch it. But the NFL is king in this country, and to be able to call a National Football League game would certainly be a dream come true for me, as trite as that sounds. And, you know, with our relationship with Fox, hopefully that opportunity materializes at some point in time. But as you guys know, there's a lot of different things going on right now when it comes to the TV deal and everything else. So my focus is MMA right now, and I really wouldn't have it on any other way. Hopefully the NFL opportunity comes at some point, but you know, I'm not holding my breath. I got enough on my plate right now, as you guys well know.
We want to get your thoughts on the TV deal in just a sec, but you mentioned your basketball is your first love. What's the pick here for the playoffs? Who do you think's winning this thing at the end?
Well, until somebody beats LeBron James, I still think the Cavaliers have a great chance. I would say the Toronto Raptors have a great shot as well. I think the winner of that series, despite all the love for Philadelphia right now, and despite my heart being with the Celtics, I think the Raptors-Cavs series winner will take on the Warriors or the Rockets. Right now, though, I think the Houston Rockets are going to win the NBA title. I really do. They're the second favorite right now, at least in terms of the betting odds. Golden State, the prohibitive favorite right now at about even money. But my money's on Houston Rockets. You know, Mick Maynard, our matchmaker, is a diehard Houston Rockets fans, takes his kids to the playoff games because he's got deeper pockets than me. So for Mick's sake, I would love to see the Rockets break through, and I think this is going to be their year.
And before we go back to MMA, LeBron's future, if you had to guess, do you think he sticks around with Cleveland, or do you think he moves on somewhere else?
I think he moves on. I think the Lakers would be appealing to him. I don't think the Knicks really have much life for him right now, even though I always thought that he would have enjoyed the challenge to resuscitate New York and that franchise. You know, I think Philadelphia's got an outside shot. I think a lot of people say with Ben Simmons, who is maybe the most watchable player in the league. That guy is incredible, and people wonder if there's enough basketball to go around if Ben Simmons and LeBron James were together in Philadelphia. I think, you deal with problems like that. So I think Philadelphia's got an outside shot, but I'd like to see him go to Lakers, and obviously as a Celtics fan, that would juice up that rivalry as well. So we'll see. I think it's going to be the Lake Show, but only time will tell.
I got a little story for you, John. Ben Simmons, obviously from around the suburbs here in Melbourne, came back here in between seasons and filled in for his friend's team locally in the gym here. People didn't realize. And then he ended up scoring 25 points, I think, and there was like a crowd of hundreds. He didn't want anyone to say anything, but word got out. It was an unbelievable event. Let's quickly get back to MMA. You spoke about the contract situation. From your perspective, what do you think about what's going on right now with the contract situation? In terms of a lot of people wondering where the future for the UFC is ultimately going to lie. Is it in pay-per-view, or is it going over to more of a, I suppose, subscription-based model like the WWE network that's found a lot of success? What are your thoughts on the whole situation as it's happening right now?
I think it's exciting. You know, I like change. You know, I moved from Connecticut to Las Vegas, Nevada, and now I'm living in South Florida. And I think for a lot of us in life, we just sort of like change every few years. That doesn't mean that I want to move away from Fox necessarily, but I think if the package was split, that would be exciting. You know, I think if there was a new streaming partner, that could be an exciting conduit for UFC programming. Certainly, I think they're going to maintain some sort of pay-per-view core, but who knows, man? I mean, my guess is no good, right? My guess is as good as anyone's on the street or not as good as anyone's on the street. But I do think it's exciting. I think there are going to be no shortage of bidders because at least here domestically in the States, it's not as though there are a lot of these major sports that are coming up. And I think our product, as you guys know, is as valuable as anything that's out there. So, you know, I'm hoping that my future lies with this promotion and this sport. And hopefully the TV deal is one that sort of bears fruit for the fighters and every other party involved.
I mean, you being the lead play-by-play commentator, I can't see any way where, you know, you wouldn't have a future with the company. But just sort of on a side note, given the big sports fanatic you are, you know, we spoke about it just before, any big tattoo bets planned recently for 2018? Any big bets in general that you've made? Obviously, you can't bet on the UFC. Any big bets in general? And do you have any tattoo bets planned for 2018?
So no tattoo bets right now, although my ears are open. If somebody comes up with a tattoo that has merit, you know, we almost did the element symbol for iron for Frankie Edgar recently, but my wife's like, dude, enough with the MMA tattoos.
What was the bet? What did it depend on?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we get away from MMA for the next one. But no, this is a very active betting season for me, the gambler that I am, with obviously the National Hockey League and the NBA both in the postseason. And I've been known to bet against the Boston teams, of course, to try to purchase postseason wins for my teams. So I've been doing a lot of that, you know, lost some money on the Sixers last night, and I'm certainly okay with it because the Celtics played great. But yeah, man, I can't bet on the UFC, obviously, for obvious reasons. So I steer clear of that and all mixed martial arts. You know, I would have liked to have been able to bet on Fedor and Frank Mir the other night, but can't do that either. So we
really, you're not allowed. What is? I mean, I'm not like that familiar with the rules here. I understand why you couldn't bet on the UFC, but you can't bet on Bellator either.
So I believe when I started with the UFC, I was not allowed to bet on anything UFC related. And then I think within the last couple of years, we signed a document that extended it to all of mixed martial arts. You know, it is what it is. And I'll have plenty of time, hopefully on the back end, to bet on MMA. But, you know, Major League Baseball, too, is active every day. So that keeps me pretty busy. But I love it. You know, it keeps me sort of involved a little bit. Like, I'm far less equipped right now to go call an NBA game than I would have been, you know, 6 or 8 years ago when my sole focus sort of became mixed martial arts. But the betting actually, believe it or not, keeps, you know, my ear to the ground and keeps me locked in a little bit. So that's one way to look at it for me. But it's always something I have fun with, and obviously something I get asked a lot about.
And speaking of the 209 bet, I mean, the rumors come out this morning, Nate Diaz possibly returning in August, the UFC 227. Now, from what we understand, Conor McGregor and Khabib aren't really a part of the options that he's got, which leaves a slew of other guys like Eddie Alvarez, guys like Tony Ferguson, a whole bunch of different names. Who would you kind of like to see Nate Diaz return to the UFC against if it does happen in August at UFC 227?
Well, I think the Eddie Alvarez fight has legs. I would like to see him fight Dustin Poirier because I think that would be a non-championship situation that would appeal to Dustin. I think the big question is, how appealing is that rematch for Dustin Poirier for Eddie Alvarez? And I think if that fight is made potentially for Calgary, that cleans up the Nate Diaz picture. And maybe the Nate Diaz situation is the reason why we don't have clarity right now. Of course, there are some rumblings that Nate Diaz would challenge Tyron Woodley for the UFC welterweight title. There's that possibility. But I think right now, I think Alvarez is the most likely opponent for Nate Diaz. And I think we all just would like to see both these guys, Nick included, back inside the octagon, especially for Nate, too. You know, I know obviously the bank account looks a lot better than it did 3 or 4 years ago, but he's losing prime time. And, you know, he's a guy who can step up on short notice and make big paydays. And I'd just like to see Nate Diaz get back in there, you know, 4, 5, 6, 8 times before he steps away for good. So hopefully Nate fights sooner rather than later, and maybe it's out of that mix of guys, Alvarez, Poirier, and the champion Woodley, believe it or not.
Yeah, see, I think Nate versus Tony Ferguson would have been an amazing fight. Obviously, Tony's injured at the moment. He won't be ready by August. So that's a criminal shame right there in itself. But you mentioned Nick, and we saw on Instagram you were wearing a T-shirt, actually legalized Diaz. So you must be pretty excited. You know, there are rumblings as well that Nick is going to return. Who would you like to see him face next? There's been, Michael Bisping thrown out there. I don't know too many other sort of realistic possibilities or matchups that jump out. Anything that stands out to you?
You know, without the rankings in front of me, I would say the first name that comes to mind is Carlos Condit, if he still has the desire for that fight. Certainly Michael Bisping has said that fight would appeal to him in a retirement fight situation.
Yeah.
But those of us close to Mike don't want to see him fight again. So that's as far as I'll go with that. I think the Condit fight certainly makes a lot of sense for Nick Diaz. It's just hard to get a gauge on the Diaz boys and what their appetite is for fighting. Certainly it seems like Nate is jonesing or getting close to a return, but it's just hard sometimes to know what their appetite is for fighting. And hopefully it is strong, and hopefully they're back soon.
While we're on the topic of lightweight, we have to talk about Khabib. Obviously, he put out the social media post. He's going to be gone till the end of the year. A lot of discussion over who he should fight next. A lot of great options there in the lightweight division. Who would you like to see Khabib defend his title against?
Well, it's hard to know what Tony Ferguson's timeline is, right? And November doesn't seem all that realistic based on the severity of the injury. Of course, I'm no doctor. Tony Ferguson's an absolute freak. So far be it from me to doubt when he could possibly return. And I don't know what Dana White's appetite is for that fight and making it a fifth time. You know, Joe Rogan told me after our broadcast at 223 or whatever it was that he would talk to Dana and try to get the wheels in motion for that fight to be made a fifth time. But
good. It needs to be made.
I mean, and the Conor McGregor, obviously, that's the elephant in the room. Does Conor want that fight? Will his legal situation even rear its ugly head in this whole situation? So if Conor McGregor is ready, willing, and able, then that's obviously the fight to make. I think Dustin Poirier, on the merits of what he has accomplished, should be in that conversation. I think Eddie Alvarez maybe less so, but certainly the Underground King has an argument there. And, you know, I mean, don't sleep on Nate Diaz, too, right? He moves the needle. We don't know what the internal metrics say about Diaz on pay-per-view, but I would imagine he's pretty strong. So a lot of different possibilities, but I wouldn't really hate any of them. I think it's just a shame for Tony that the injury is as severe as it is, because as you mentioned, there's so many big fights for that guy right now, and he's not going to realize those paydays and those championship opportunities probably until 2019, maybe not even till the second quarter. So we'll see.
And you know, the thing with like Tony and Khabib, I mean, the injuries that they've suffered, it can happen, you know, before any opponent. So not making that fight doesn't really make sense because, hey, they could get injured fighting Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz or anyone you throw together with them. But I want to get your thoughts on the Conor McGregor situation because, you know, despite what he did and all the consequences, doesn't really look like the UFC are going to punish him. And it doesn't even look like they will even be able to punish him because realistically, you know, he's a huge name. He's going to fight at some point. And obviously, you know, they're not going to fire him or anything like that. Is there anything that can be done at all?
Well, it's tricky because the calendar continues to turn and nothing has been done, right? So the UFC could have gotten ahead of it and maybe tried to get ahead of the law, but I don't know that that made a ton of sense. So they're waiting for the legal stuff to take its course. All the while, you could argue that he's being suspended right now, right? I mean, I know this isn't necessarily the guy who wants to fight next weekend, but, you know, what if he wanted to step up on short notice here in a few weeks with all these massive welterweight main events? Would he be prevented from doing so? I don't know the answer to that question. So I hope we get some sort of resolution sooner rather than later, but it's hard to blame the UFC for not sort of laying back in the cut and waiting to see what happens legally there in New York.
And I guess there's also the situation from his perspective. You know, do you think that him getting away with sort of minimal punishments, it would only add to Conor McGregor's somewhat, you know, feeling of invincibility, because it seems like he's been sort of pushing the boundaries of that for a while now. He's had a few of these, I guess, public meltdowns, and he's not really seeing any repercussions. And, you know, I'm not some expert on, you know, young men with lots of money, but it kind of seems like if they, you know, hey, I'm a young man, I don't have a lot of money, but it kind of seems like, you know, when there are no repercussions, it only fuels that fire to say, hey, you are invincible, and there are really no boundaries to what you can do.
Right. And of course, I won't be the first one on your airwaves to say that only could have done a lot more damage. And we could be talking about a guy who is in prison for a couple decades. Right. So it's not like he threw the dolly at the base of the bus and just wanted to make a statement. You know, he got so reckless that he really endangered some lives. So, yeah, man, it's a lot to digest, and a lot of people are very disappointed. I think that there will be some sort of punishment. What that's going to be, I really don't know. And I just think it's such a tricky situation, right? Because you can argue out of one side of your mouth and say, hey, you're going to set a standard here. If this guy doesn't get punished, you know, all bets are off when the next guy steps out of line during fight week or otherwise. But this is not just a special case, right? This is Conor McGregor, and there will never be another, right? This is the biggest star in mixed martial arts history, and it's starting to feel like Ronda Rousey isn't even a close second, or John Jones a close. So you're asking me, I mean, how would I handle this as a promoter? I really don't know. I think it's easy for me to say if I was the boss, you know, I'd be coming down hard on the guy. But you know, I guess I'd just like to see him be remorseful, especially publicly, to all of these fighters. And poor Ray Borg going through his own personal hell right now with his child. So, you know, I'd like to see something like that. You know, even like Li Jingliang, and I hate to get off topic, but what happened with him in Shanghai against Zach Otto and the eye gouge, all you got to do sometimes, and I hate to minimize what Conor did, but get out ahead of it. Make a public statement. You know, be sincere and genuine and heartfelt in your apology, and make it quick. And I thought for Li Jingliang, if he had just come out and issued something publicly, that could have, you know, dissipated a little bit. So I think for Conor, that's what I'd like to see. And again, I'm not sure New York is in any rush, but I'd also be surprised to see the New York State Athletic Commission, you know, let Conor fight there anytime soon.
Was the situation, you think, even more difficult, not only because, you know, some fighters got injured and fights got canceled, because obviously the employees, the UFC employees on the bus also had to go through that ordeal. And we saw there was some serious injuries sustained. I think a broken knuckle or a broken hand. Have you been able to speak to any of the colleagues that were on that bus? Is everyone sort of recovered or dealing okay after that, the whole situation?
Yeah, the staff was okay. And, you know, some bumps and bruises, obviously, that you outlined. I just, for Rose Namajunas, right, being right there in the line of fire, so to speak. And again, you know, given what the backdrop in this country has been, right, you know, if I'm on that bus, am I thinking it's a terrorist attack? You know, I don't know if I can make that leap, but I think for a lot of people, you feel like you're under attack and you feel like it's an act of terrorism as it's going down. So for Rose Namajunas to have that be what starts her evening and her weight cut, you know, 2 nights before her title defense against Joanna, and for all the other fighters to be able to compete and rise above that situation was just so incredible. But yeah, the staffers are okay, and thankfully it wasn't worse. You know, it could have been, you know, it was melee. It could have been even worse, and thankfully, you know, everybody does seem to be okay.
On a lighter note, I mean, early predictions, if that was the fight that was to happen, Khabib versus Conor, who would you be leaning towards in that one?
You know, Kenny Florian and I have talked a lot about this on our podcast and which lightweight is best equipped to beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, who I still believe is the most dominant force in the game. If that means I think he is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, I don't know. But when he's at his best, I think he is certainly the most suffocating and the most dominating. But if I had to pick one lightweight to beat him, it's Conor McGregor because of the accuracy and the precision and the power and the footwork and the distance management and understanding and everything that makes him, you know, the world-class, you know, generational type striker that he is. So that's the fight. I think it's pretty close on paper. I think Khabib deserves the distinction as the betting favorite, but Conor's the guy. You know, if I had to pick one lightweight to beat Khabib, Conor's the guy, and that's the fight. And hopefully Conor is willing to step back from this type of layoff against that type of monster. You know, I'm just not sure that fight is the most appetizing one for Conor to make this return, but hopefully it'll happen, and hopefully it'll be November at MSG.
Do you reckon maybe, I guess in his mind, it would make sense to sort of take maybe a lesser matchup, maybe somebody a little bit less dominant, and then sort of warm himself up towards Khabib?
Yeah, I think so. And as I've said repeatedly, I think it was more likely that Conor McGregor would come back in a situation in which he was the betting favorite, whether it was against Nate Diaz or Tony Ferguson, whom he would probably be favored to beat. But this matchup stylistically is a huge challenge. All of that said, if I know Conor McGregor the way I think I do, that would be appealing to him. He cares very much about his mixed martial arts legacy. So in theory, this would be a huge opportunity for him to bounce Khabib from the ranks of the unbeaten and be the guy to slay the dragon, so to speak, even though, you know, Conor has been the man for a long time. He'll be the underdog that night. So, you know, I think a lot of athletes, elite athletes, they like being the underdog, and hopefully that type of situation appeals to Conor.
Going to be interesting to see who wins the mental battle there as well before the fight even happens. Now, John, before we let you go, just quickly want to touch on Frank Mir and Fedor. You mentioned it earlier in the interview. What did you think of the Fedor that we saw this past weekend? What did you think of the fight?
Well, he's got heart for days, right? He's got a great kicker, and he's super tough, and he never lets the moment get the best of him, even though maybe his primer days are behind him. You know, Frank Mir is a guy who I go way back with and obviously worked together for the first time at ESPN, I think in 2007, 2008. You know, just felt like he was a little bit reckless. Obviously, it was an arduous 4 or 5 months for him, 300-plus pounds in January, and got himself into fight shape. But you know, his chin's not there, and that's not to take anything away from Fedor Emelianenko, but I just think for Frank Mir, you just got to be a little bit more careful in the pocket and in those situations at this stage of your career. So taking nothing away from Fedor, he moves on, but for Frank Mir, you know, you wait this long, you're on the shelf for however many years, and, you know, 48, 49 seconds later, it's over. So, you know, I think for a lot of these fights too, like Rose and Joanna, the first one, not that I felt shortchanged, but sometimes when these fights are over before they start and there's been so much buildup, you just sort of want a little more as a fight fan, I guess.
When you see him, and obviously a lot of fans very just excited to see Fedor win in a sort of old school Fedor way, do you have any sort of not regret, but are you upset that he never sort of made it into the UFC? I know a lot of fans kind of think, what would have happened if Fedor was in the UFC in his prime? Do you ever think about that? What would have happened if he was in the heavyweight division in the UFC when he was still the best Fedor that we remember?
Yeah, I think we all would have loved to see it. But I really feel like as you get older and you become a parent and you become less of a sports fanatic in life, and you get to know the athletes a little bit, you're just happy to see Fedor realize success at this stage of his career, or happy to see Ronda Rousey be happy in the WWE, right? And I know it probably sounds like a little bit of a cop-out answer, but as I get older, that's where my emotion lies. I'm happy that Fedor, who wasn't guaranteed the moment he just had Saturday night, was able to have that moment. But yeah, I mean, it would be great to have Fedor in the UFC, and selfishly, obviously, to be able to call one of his fights would be incredible. So, you know, I think that door has closed, but you just never know, boys.
Where, just quickly, as we let you go, where do you stand on this GOAT debate? I mean, do you sort of lean towards Fedor and his past accomplishments, what he did over the span of, 10 years or so, or are you leaning towards Stipe as the new GOAT because of what he's done recently and his recent success?
You know, one of the things that I got to be careful about is speaking in absolutes, and I think I do it a lot, and it's hard to argue with Stipe's body of work, and to me, it's hard to argue with these modern era guys. Ken Flo's my boy, right? But against the top 5 right now at 155 pounds, I don't like his chances as much as I liked his chances in 2009, 2010, So the game has changed a lot. But I think Fedor is certainly in that conversation. I think Daniel Cormier, come July 6th, July 7th, has a great chance to leapfrog everybody. And people just don't understand how special Daniel Cormier is. And I know it's 13-0 at heavyweight, and it wasn't always a murderer's row, even though there were Josh Barnett and Bigfoot Silva's on there. But hey, C beats Stipe July 7th. This is a whole new conversation, not just for greatest heavyweight of all time, greatest mixed martial arts athlete of all time.
And I'm a believer. Also, his age and the fact that he's willing to fight anybody at any time, DC, is definitely just a remarkable guy. Quickly, before we let you go, though, Charles Sonnen versus Fedor next. What's the prediction here? Do you think Charles Sonnen can do it, or do you think this could be another win for Fedor?
Well, size should matter, but it doesn't always, right? Courtney Casey and Michelle Watterson, I think, taught us that. But size should matter. I haven't seen the betting line. I would imagine Fedor will be the betting favorite, but hey, I'm focused on UFC 224, boys. We got 13 strong coming up here in 11 days or so in Rio de Janeiro. I had to get all the shots this time, yellow fever and typhoid fever, hepatitis A and B. So we're ready to go. We're going to hunker down in the hotel room and get back at it here in about a week and a half. So ready to go.
We'll be listening, man. It's good to know that you'll be safe, free from all the diseases and everything like that. You can enjoy Brazil stress-free. Actually, probably not stress-free because there'll be a lot of, obviously, work for yourself to do. But there he is, guys, Jon Anik. Don't forget to follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Anik. And, of course, if you're not listening to Anik and Florian podcast, what are you really doing with your lives? I mean, you simply have to. There's a lot of great discussion, great analysis, and the occasional tease of a tattoo bet. You never know when the next one's going to come around the corner, so a lot of reasons to tune in. Jon, really appreciate your time, man. We could speak to you all day, but we'll let you go. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on the program.
Likewise, man. Good to be with you. And maybe just for you guys, we'll try to figure out a tattoo bet for July. You just never know. I need a good idea. So if you can come up with the idea and it's a tattoo that I'm willing to live with for the rest of my life, then maybe we'll be on to something. But thank you for having me and have a good night.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, this is a special treat. This guy has been a longtime friend of the program. He is, of course, a UFC Hall of Famer, former heavyweight champion in the UFC more times, King of Pancreas and the Weekend Count, and a Hollywood star, being in such movies such as Here Comes the Boom, and now acting in the hit TV show Kevin Can Wait. Of course, El Guapo himself, Bas Rutten. Welcome back to Submission Radio. We are excited to have the King back on the program, smoking a cigar as well. First time on video too.
Smoking a pancake is the Austin Powers, right? I don't know what you're saying. Movie star, I don't know, man. I don't know about movie star. I'm a guy. Movie stars are like freaking Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. You know, those are big movie stars.
I feel like you've got a good name for it though. You've got the 3 syllables. Bas Rutten. You know, it's short. You know, it's got impact. Better than Dwayne Johnson. Come on now.
You know how it sounds in Dutch? It's a very simple name, Bas Rutten. See, when you come to America, it's Bas Rutten. They go, yeah. That's a much better sound to it than Bas Rutten.
Yeah. What kind of cigar have you got there? What kind of cigar are you smoking?
This is a Gurkha cigar. Which one is this? The Gurkha. Oh, wait, I can look it up because I always pull the band off. It's a Rogue. A Gurkha Rogue. Normally, I take that with beer like this. Today, this one is empty, unfortunately. This beer, if they have that in Australia, it's from Firestone, is the best beer out there. But a bottle like this, like $10 or $11, just a little bottle. It's 12.5% alcohol, though, and it's almost like a meal. They put it in like whiskey barrels, bourbon barrels, and it's a mixture of beer, port, wine, whiskey. I mean, it's something. It is so good, and that together with a cigar, match made in heaven.
You're in heaven. Yeah, I was going to say, and you mentioned to us it's cold over there, so a beer and a cigar sounds really nice. It's freezing here, so a beer and a cigar would be really nice here in Submission Radio. But I mean, a bit of a I don't know if it's like a celebration. I guess it kind of makes sense, right? Because we saw recently it was 21-year anniversary of your win over Kyuma Kinoku at Pancrase Alive 4, right? 6 years later, you of course defeated Kevin Randleman to win the UFC heavyweight title, part of a 22-fight undefeated streak to your career. That's cigar worthy right there. What do you think when you see those crazy anniversaries and they pop up? I know. Today in MMA on Twitter they do a really good job. What do you think when you see all these crazy achievements that you've done?
You know, it is nuts to see it such a long time ago. Sometimes it feels like the time just flies really fast. But I found an idea. You got to, be aware of it. Like say, okay, today, like let's say the 1st of May, you do a certain thing and you make sure that you remember that. And if you do that, and every time fall back to that day, then time doesn't go as fast as normally would. Because otherwise it looks like, man, we went 2 years ago to Rome. And I feel like when we were 4 months further, I thought it was already, No, I'm saying this wrong. A year further, it looked like it was 2 months ago. And I go, how is that even possible? But when you start looking back and you start looking at the things you did in a year, then the year stretches again. So don't look at one thing. Sometimes just every month, place a thing that you can remember, and that gives you a feeling that life does go the normal speed and not as fast as we think it is.
And that 22-fight undefeated streak, that's pretty epic. It's a major rarity in MMA, just in general, not even just these days, but just in general. What was the key, do you think, to keeping that streak alive?
The key was that I didn't know. I didn't know. I started realizing it I think somebody told me at 16 or 17. A Japanese guy told me. He says, but you understand that you didn't lose for 17 fights in a row or 16 fights in a row. And I look at him and I go, oh, you should have not said that. I had no clue. And because I was afraid that I was going to look for it and maybe fight different, but thankfully it never happened. Thankfully, I just always, I'm so proud of that. I have only three decisions, in my entire career, and the rest it's all finishes and an equal spread. You know, like 14 submissions, 11 knockouts. So I went in as a striker, and I came out of a submission guy almost. So yeah, I'm really proud of that record. I have to say though that if I wouldn't have had injuries, I would have kept on fighting, and then I probably would have lost. You know, so injuries kind of made this, because going out with 22 undefeated streak, that's a really good thing to have. But it's, you know, truth to be told, I would have kept on fighting, and then eventually, of course, you're going to lose to these young bucks nowadays. I mean, they're insanely good.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it. Obviously, the skill level has, you know, it's always constantly evolving. Do you ever sort of look at yourself and look at some of the guys, especially in, say, like I guess these days you'd be more suited to light heavyweight. Do you ever sort of think about how your style would translate, you know, if sort of, you know, you were in your prime now and you didn't have all those injuries and they didn't cut your career short?
Yeah, I don't know. It's what I would do if I still would have been fighting, I would have gone to, like, live in Colorado, go there for a year and wrestle every day. Just wrestle there at the Olympic Training Center with all these wrestlers and keep on going, keep on going. I think that was the only component missing from me. Now, don't get me wrong. I just made sure that I was really good on the ground. So that's another cool thing, you know, when you read that at the ultimate, the Hall of Fame statistics, it said that I won 14 times by submission, but I never attempted a single takedown. So that meant that they took me to the ground, I reversed them, and I went for a submission, or I did it for my back. But nowadays you have these guys, animals. You know, when I was supposed to fight Fedor, that was deep in the back of my head that I had to watch out, because his ground and pound was just extremely powerful, you know. And I go like, man, how am I going to stop that? But I would just simply sit up in my guard to hold. I would be on him. So if we're both down, this is Fedor and this is me on the bottom. If he would go up, I would go sit up. I would constantly try to close that distance to make sure. Then again, you know, simple crossface from him and pushing me back. It's going to take me a lot of power. Then my core starts working. That starts bloating up. Lactic acid in your core is the worst thing. And that's why all these fights are getting tired.
Man, I'll tell you what, if that fight came together, it would just be absolutely epic. It's just thinking about you versus Fedor in your prime.
Imagine if you ruined Fedor's streak. Imagine that. Imagine if you
it'd be streak versus
history.
Streak
at that time,
streak.
yeah, that would have been something. For me, when they said that was after a while. I didn't fight for a whole bunch of years, and then when the fight approached itself, I said, okay, let me first train for a week, and I'll let you know after a week, because I didn't do anything for 3.5 years. You know, so then I started training, and for me, it was just I figured that if I could do it, you know, I just wanted to go the distance with Fedor. That was my goal. And then we'll see what happens in between.
Wow.
But if I would go the distance with him, then I will already be happy, especially after such a long layoff.
Just to give us some framing, do you remember what year it was? Like after which Fedor fight, you know, you guys were potentially meant to fight? Was this before you fought, what was his name? Not War Machine. The last guy, Warpath or whatever, the last guy that you fought?
Yeah, that was 2000, what was it, 6, right? I think so. Yeah, after 7 years. So this, I believe it will be 2004, 2005. It was when I was still working for Fighting Championships.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at the time with the last guy I had. And then they called me. But I had to be honest. I said, listen, I can't. It's hurting. It's not looking good. I almost fought Wanderlei Silva. That was at the Dynamite show. And I really wanted that. And I told him, I said, listen, since it's Dynamite show was a mix for K1 and Pride.
Yeah.
So they had a K1 match and then they had a Pride match, a K1 match, Pride match. And I go, okay, I got it. I said, I didn't train for ground for 3 years. Wanderlei is not going to want to go to the ground anyway. Why don't we do MMA gloves, and we just do a Thai boxing match? Anything goes, all the punches, kicks, elbows. We do everything stomped, but with MMA gloves. I think that would have been great. But, it didn't go through. He got a different opponent very last minute.
Yeah.
Man, I almost feel bad when you tell me these stories just because of just thinking of what would have happened if these matchups came together. You mentioned Fedor, so we have to get your thoughts. What did you think of the Fedor that we saw this past weekend? A lot of MMA fans kind of happy to see Fedor get a signature win again.
Yeah, I knew it was going to happen. You know, you're watching the show Mindhunter on Netflix. It's my buddy Holt McElhenney. He's one of the lead actors. And he called me. He said, dude, Mir's a favorite. What do you think? I said, well, if it stays on the ground, I think, you know, Fedor's going to win this fight. I said, but I know you're a gambler. Don't start gambling and losing money, you know, and blame it on me. And he said, no, don't worry about it. But you would go for Fedor. I said, I will go for Fedor. Now, Fedor has good takedown defense as well. If this fight would have gone to the ground, You know, and I know Fedor's insanely good, but, you know, he fought 3 times against Big Nog, and that was not Big Nog's prime, and he could never stop him, remember? But Mir did. And I thought that was amazing. I would have loved to see this fight go to the ground, at least for a little bit, and see those guys go on the ground. But Fedor's technique, it's I always say this, it's almost like he does things on purpose. Like his striking, his hands are low, and he moves weird. But, man, he's got that laser-guided precision. And he's got enormous power, and there's no zero. It's a zero load up. He doesn't load up. He doesn't load up like this. He just punches straight from here. And the same thing with the submissions. Sometimes it looks awkward, and then you look, and he's awkward, and then he pulls off the slickest submission. You know, so I truly believe he's doing these things on purpose. You know, to let the opponent what's going on, and whoop, suddenly he's into a really nice armbar. He's got really great technique. So yeah, it would have been great to see them both on the ground.
How do you think this affects Fedor going forward? Because obviously, you know, as fans, everybody's kind of relieved because Fedor hasn't had this kind of dominance in a long time. And he's never really been the kind of guy who operates on confidence per se. But getting this win, doing it in somewhat signature fashion, do you think that in some ways makes him a little bit more dangerous, especially moving forward in this tournament bracket?
Yeah, well, he's 41, yeah? 41 or 42, I can't think. So it's... I don't know. I felt really good at 42, I have to say. I felt incredible. Only the injuries. I had the injuries. But if he's physically good and mentally good, he's still there. You know, yeah, he had some bad luck, but look what he's doing right now. He's doing really well. So I don't know what's going to be against Chill, because Chill, you know, I don't know if Chill can take him down to the ground. And I know Chill's a really good wrestler, but he needs this fight on the ground. And we can see from Fedor with the laser-guided precision I was talking about, you know, that even if Chill is really good at taking people to the ground, there's still that puncher's chance. And if somebody can connect just before that, that could be Fedor. But I think with his sambo, he might keep the fight on his feet, and that could be trouble for Chill.
Just speaking of Chael, I know that obviously it's been a few years since he's been in his prime, and a lot of people sort of criticize him because some of his promos can be a little bit of cringeworthy. But when you look back at the history of Chael Sonnen, you know, he took fights with some of the toughest guys that were around. I mean, he took that short notice fight with John Jones, or not short notice, but he took that fight with John Jones. You know, he fought Anderson Silva twice when Anderson Silva was destroying everyone and almost beat him once. You know, he's fighting Fedor when really Chael Sonnen is probably more of a middleweight in his prime. Do you think he sort of deserves some kind of credit for at least taking whatever fight comes his way against, you know, tougher opponents that other people maybe might have ducked if they were in his position?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with Chael. He, like you said, he takes every fight. He doesn't care, and then he pulls Mauricio Shogun, who boom pulls. I mean, sometimes he goes into the fight. That's what I'm saying. I'm not going to say that Fedor's going to win, because Chael is that one guy, you know, that if you underestimate him a little bit, suddenly he's got you locked up into something crazy, you know. And the way he's talking, you know, and hopefully it gets in Fedor's head, although it didn't really work right when they were standing together.
How funny was that moment? Chael, like, Fedor had no idea what Chael was saying, and then, like, Chael's all serious, and then Fedor's just like, here, goes for the handshake. That was so good.
You know what? I think people should know, but Fedor speaks English. And,
yeah.
And
do you think he understood everything Chael said?
100%. He's just a very smart guy, and that's why he comes again with the smile and the handshake. You know, he's just testing him out, and as soon as they give the hand back, he kind of knows he's got him, right?
Yeah. So he's like a computer. He got a lot of data from that handshake, just like the Terminator, analyzing everything.
He tries it out one more time, right? I think it's genius. So and Chael was literally bothered by it. He didn't want to do it.
You reckon Chael was a little bit rubbed the wrong way by it?
No, not rubbed the wrong way, but I don't think that he wanted to give him a hand. But it's Fedor, and he had the smile on his face, and he had to do it, you know. So then he gave him the hand, and you saw in his face like, I gave him a hand, you know. I shouldn't have done that last moment. So yeah. I think it's a fishing thing that Fedor is doing. See how he reacts.
Because that's not what bad guys do. He's not supposed to shake his hand. Yeah, I loved it. I thought that was such a good moment. Just sort of going, you know, looking back at Fedor, obviously you commentated so many of his fights. You were around him so much in Pride. You know, when you think back to it, what do you think is your favorite Fedor fight memory that you can recall? Whether you were there commentating or whether it's just something that you remember from Fedor and has always stuck out to you?
Yeah, all these fights. Of course, the Merkel Crow Cup fight, that was something. You know, the way they came out. I always talk about this, the video footage they had over there in Japan, the packages they made about Fedor and Mirko. That was something, man. We had tears in our eyes. I remember Mirko coming up, and Mirko's crying. He just saw the picture of his father's grave, you know, what they were showing. And then there were bodies floating in the water, in the river, and there was ice on the river, and bodies floating. Needless to say, it was going back to the war. And I get goosebumps now. And then you saw him training in that high-tech gym, like Drago, Ivan Drago. Yeah. And you see Fedor with the rusty kettlebells, and he's running in the snow with the wooden things in his neck, you know. And he's got the simplicity, and he's got the high-tech stuff. And man, it was so cool, well done, back and forth. Man, they should show this in America, you know, on pay-per-view. But they said, no, we cannot because they paid for this and they won't allow us to show it. So I should go on YouTube and see if we ever can find that. That was a cool piece.
Yeah, oh man, if someone could fish that, that'd be awesome. Do you have any other sort of like funny memories like of Fedor sort of backstage around Pride shows? Anything that kind of, I guess, happened that sort of like, you know, takes you into Fedor's character or something that maybe people wouldn't expect ever seeing or happening with Fedor?
No, Fedor's Fedor. You know, the face that you see with the smirk or normal, that's him all the time. So they had an article in Japan. There were 2 pages, and then they had pictures of Fedor everywhere. And all the pictures were exactly the same. And it said, Fedor angry, Fedor happy, Fedor this, Fedor. It's on the bottom, his emotion, but it was the same picture. And the good thing about Fedor is, if you go to in Japan, I don't think it's now anymore, but I think in Japan, he was very stoic and he almost never smiled. And later in his career, he started doing that. So when you would go to a press conference, it would be quiet. And as soon as he would smirk, you go, oh, everything. The place will blow up. I mean, you see a freaking spark of God knows how much light. And then it was quiet again. But every time he had a smirk, everybody's shooting their cameras.
Wow, that's the $1 million shot. Did you ever try and like get a rise out of him? Did you ever try and crack jokes with him? And obviously, like Pride, that was like the Wild Wild West, but that was the land of the pranksters. We'll never forget Mirko Krokop and Mauro Ranallo. Did you ever try and prank Fedor?
No, I'm not going to prank Fedor. No. The thing is this. Okay, Krokop, you can say, I don't know how he's going to react. Fedor, you know he's not going to hate you. You know he's not. But he's such a good guy. Yeah. You know, and then there is something about being the fact that he's such a lovable, good guy, and then he can kill you. You know, like literally with his power, he's got such an insane power, and you know from this guy he would never do that. So you don't need to be afraid of it. But he's such a you don't want to do that. Now Mauro is a really nice guy too, but I had to do it with him.
And he's got a great documentary coming out as well that everybody needs to check out. Quickly talking about the tournament, though, Ryan Bader is still supposed to fight King Mo, and we know there's a fight between Roy Nelson and Krokop, and that's if someone gets injured, they can sort of slide in there and fill in. Who do you think is going to win this thing? If you had to pick one person, are you backing Fedor here, or do you think Ryan Bader's going to win this thing? Who do you think wins the tournament?
Mitrione, maybe. That's another one.
Mitrione's in there, yeah.
Yeah, Mitrione is still in then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitrione or Fedor. I mean, it's a hard one. But Mitrione or Fedor, I would think. You know, this is one of those things that you know, who had a rough patch for a while. It was Mark Coleman, and then he did the 2000 Open weight class at the Pride Fighting Championship, and he won the whole thing. You know, and it was everybody spat him out before that fight. Yeah. And he went to Pat Miletich, and Pat was talking to me about him before the fight. He said, dude, every time I told him, okay, let's run this hill 5 times, and then he would do it 3 more times every time. He said, I've never seen him like this. He's been training so incredibly hard, and then he won the whole tournament. So, you know, this could be a thing with Fedor also. This could be his thing, and maybe that he says after winning this tournament that he's out. You know, and if you have a mindset like that and a goal, yeah, you're going to do everything in your power to make it, to let it come to fruition. So I don't know. He might win this thing. Then again, yeah, there's some heavy hitters there. The thing with Fedor is he just has to connect. Like with Mir, he didn't even connect full. You see what I mean? He's got so much power, even if it's half or it's grace, you're going down. That's the thing with him. He connects, it's over.
How would you see potentially Ryan Bader and Fedor going? Do you think Bader has a chance here? Because if Fedor can beat Chael Sonnen, which you know is a high possibility, right? And if Bader can beat King Mo, and then if he beats Matt Mitrione, which that's a tough test in on itself right there, he might meet Fedor in the finals. Do you think Bader would have a chance at beating, a guy like Fedor these days? And it's interesting because Fedor isn't, the biggest heavyweight, and Ryan Bader's sort of, a light heavyweight, but he's not, he's not a small guy either.
Ryan has always a chance. I mean, again, that's one of those guys. And Ryan is a guy that you still see growing.
Yeah.
Also, over his career, he never stops learning. So he's getting better and better all the time. And those guys, you see, like when I don't fight anymore, I'm not going to go into footage and I'm going to break everything down. But you better believe that those guys are doing it with Fedor. And they're going to go to all the matches that he lost and what did he do wrong there and how did he set it up, and they're going to try to break it down and see if they can mimic that. So I don't know. Yeah, I have no clue. Again, I'm always coming back to a guy who has one-punch knockout. It's always dangerous. Then again, once you get in his face, Dan Henderson, you remember, Fedor attacked him and Dan goes, oh, excuse me, and then he starts wheeling back right away. So you might surprise him like that as well because a lot of people are afraid of him because he's got so much power. It's the same as Mike Tyson. I think 80% of the fighters already lost before the fight because he has that charisma, he has that power. But if you tell yourself before you go in, you know what? He's going to have to kill me, man. I'm not going to give this as a present to him. So, yeah, I might lose, but he's going to find out what it is to fight me. And if you go in with a mindset like that, and you just refuse to give up, or refuse to, then you might do good. But that means you're going to have to come in there right away. You have to start attacking Fedor instead of the other way around.
Unbelievable. And you mentioned charisma. I know you've been very, very good with your time. We don't want to keep you for too long because it's cold outside, but we want to quickly get your thoughts of another man with charisma and switching over to the UFC now. We haven't had a chance to talk to you about Conor McGregor and the craziness that we saw, the whole bus incident and what happened there at UFC 223. Tell us, now that it's been a little bit of time and things have settled down, what's your reaction to everything that went down that day and Conor McGregor's, I suppose, attack on the bus?
We are not in Conor McGregor's shoes. People can shout what they want. They have no clue what goes on. I think once people realize that you have $50 million, he gets mail all day long for people with sick babies and sick kids and sick grandma, and everybody wants him to give money. I mean, that goes on and so on. He doesn't only have money, he is super famous on top of that. So I knew the stupid stuff I did when I was 28. No, I didn't do that. Okay, but he has a group around him, and and he was already angry going in because they're going to strip him from the title, and he's angry. And now when the partners, his friends, start going, hey, maybe we should throw something against him. But everybody starts agreeing. Yeah, you get caught up in that whole moment, and you start doing it. That's why I said when I was on Joe Rogan, I said, guys, we should give him a pass. And then people go online, they go like, is he crazy? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, yes, he's going to have to pay for what he did. He has to go to court. He has to do all that. I'm not saying that. Of course he has to. And I said that on Rogan as well. But give him a pass as a fan. Why don't kick the guy under the bus, right? Don't kick the guy under the bus. He did so much good for MMA. He just needs to find his way in this world. This guy was pretty much unknown 4 years ago. Now he's one of the most known guys on the planet. It's a hard thing to deal with. I don't know if I could have done it. So I always try to put myself in their shoes, and I go, man, yeah, me with that kind of money at that age, I don't know what would have happened to me. I don't, I'm a smart guy now. I would think that I would keep that money, but I don't. At 28, I don't know, man. I was just a complete different animal. So I hope that they just, give him a pass. Don't spit him out yet. Let him see if he cleans up. I mean, you give Jon Jones all passes. Well, I think that, Let's do that. And me too. I love Jon Jones. I want to see him back. I was such a talent that is gone, and I want to see him fight. This could be a guy who can literally go undefeated his entire life. So, yeah, I would love to see a guy like that back. Plus, this is a great comeback. It's like the Apostle Paul I'm talking about. Right? But he came back, and now he's a big believer. Jesus visited him, but the whole thing happened. This is the impact you can have. Your impact that Conor can have now on kids and that Jon Jones can have, become a really good fighter and become a role model. Stop changing lives around. Stop making people happy and start, doing things, charity. I think once guys like that start doing it, then more people start doing it. And with their power that they have, hopefully people start following them and do the same thing.
And final question on McGregor. If him and Khabib do fight, what is your pick? Who do you predict wins? Because that's the big blockbuster fight. One of the big blockbuster fights everyone's talking about.
Yeah, I go back to Chad Mendes, right? And Chad didn't have only 12 days to train or something, and he put him on his back immediately, pretty much. And he had a problem on his back. Khabib is a guy who's not going to run out of gas in a full training camp, and he's going to be on him. Now, don't get me wrong, and I mean, Khabib's never been knocked out, nothing, but Conor can hit. He can really hit. And if he really uses footwork and he can land a shot and hope to capitalize on that, but I think once it goes to the ground, a guy like Khabib, it's just very hard to get off of you. Now, I don't know what he's been doing. He might have been wrestling even throughout his boxing camp that he had with Mayweather the match. I don't know, but he knows it's his Achilles heel. So he needs to work on that. And I had the same thing. I was pretty much the same as Conor. I was a great striker, but, I sucked at takedown defense. So I don't know. It's a hard one. It's a puncher's chance. He uses a lot of footwork, and he can tag him, and he can actually knock him out, stop him. Yeah, it will. That Conor can do it, but can he knock him out? That's the question. Otherwise, it's going to be one of those fights that it's going to be grueling. It's going to be constantly on him. If you face a really good striker, there's nothing worse to fight him constantly pushing forward. Now, you're going to need a lot of stamina for that. But then again, you're wearing your opponent out as well. So it's like the Cormier fights and Cain Velasquez. Like that, the best strikers have difficulty with that because you can't put your feet down, and all the power comes from the foot. If I can't push off of my back foot, I can't put my body weight in the punch. Now, it doesn't mean that I can still knock him out. Of course I can. There's guys that get punched out with a punch like that. I'm not saying that. But, in order to get a big guy and a strong guy, yeah, you want to have your foot on the floor, or 2 feet on the floor with hooks and uppercuts, and at least your back foot on the floor once you start throwing straight punches. And if you can't do that, well, it takes a lot of power away. So if Khabib is probably going to do this the whole time, and he's going to have to work angles. But it's 25 minutes fight time. It's a long time to avoid a takedown.
And that's, and that's the reason why, obviously, as fight fans, we're not sitting here sort of, wanting to throw the book at Conor. Of course, every one of us here speaking wants to see Conor back, and everybody wants to see that, Conor versus Khabib fight. But just quickly, I just wanted to elaborate sort of on what you said before, because Conor sort of had these kind of like public meltdowns before. He had that thing in Bellator with, Mike Goddard and jumping over the cage, and now, this whole bus thing. I wonder if you can relate, because you spoke about some of the, things that you did when you were young and you had money, and just kind of seems like when people are kind of young and with Conor, maybe he feels like he's sort of invincible, and if nothing happens, kind of like I guess with John Jones, where if nothing happens to make them realize and go, all right, I need to change things. Like if he gets away with it and nothing happens, it kind of sends the message that like, well, I did whatever I wanted, and there are no consequences. Do you think something has to, again, I don't want to see the book thrown at him, but do you think something has to happen so that he realizes, all right, I can't do whatever I want. There are consequences to these things.
Yeah, no, of course. And, like jumping in a ring, you have to understand, nobody says no to this guy. And if you, for a year and a half, nobody says no to you, you walk into, he probably doesn't have a pass. Normally he needs a wristband to walk in, and people don't say anything. Well, why can't I jump in the cage if my friend just won? You see, it's a logical thing, and especially if you have 2 drinks, now it becomes, of course I can do. Well, what would be wrong with this? That's how you think. And yeah, I could have made that mistake easy. I think it would have been the same. And you just said when you had money. To me, I never had that kind of money.
Sure, yeah.
But, so that's the thing. I think if I would have had that kind of money at that age, I don't know what I would have done. I'm just I'm talking always to Don Fry, and we're always very happy about the fact that there was no social media when we were fighting. There would have been a lot of crazy pictures.
Wow, you think people would have put up videos and photos of you guys?
Oh, for sure. People with the cameras. I mean, with the fights we had there in Japan, like on the street with crazy people. I mean, it was nonstop. But you never fight with a Japanese guy. You will never. But if I see a little Japanese guy get beat up by 2 big Americans or Australians or whatever they come from, yeah, I'm going to say something. And especially because I can, right? So, okay, guys, leave the little guy alone. Well, what do you want to do about it? Well, actually, if you want, you can always try. You see, that was in the early days.
Did that happen? Did you ever end up fighting like random dudes because they didn't know who you were in Japan because you were sort of standing up for like the little guy?
I had guys literally walking into me and challenging me and taking me outside. And then literally, like Guy Metzger would say to these guys, we're all professional fighters. And he's like, the worst one you can pick right now, so don't do that. And they were, oh, we all go, you know. I go, these guys said they were Navy SEALs. They had SEALs tattooed on their bellies. They weren't Navy SEAls. They were just a bunch of bluff guys. But I stopped them all three. One guy, I choked him. One guy, I armbarred, the last one. I armbarred and he's screaming and I wouldn't hurt him, so I let him go. And right away when I let him go, he jumped on top of me again. I roll him into the bar and now he's pleading to please not. And they're already saying, just snap his leg. And I go, nah, you know, I'm not going to do that. So I let go.
Who was saying that? Guy Mesger and Don Fry?
The group of fighters that were there.
Yeah.
And right away when I let go, he attacks me again.
Oh, man.
And I just put him to sleep. And that's why I just put him to sleep.
What did you do? You checked him out?
No, we might have pulled his pants down, I think, when he was down. Yeah. But they were fighting everybody. It was literally in the bar, and I see them come in, and you see the people flying out of the path. They were pushing everybody away. And I'm looking at my friends, I said, oh, and right away when I'm looking to the side, boom, they push me, and that's how it started. You know, so when I see that, all these, the little people that they pick out, you know, and then actually they did it also with me. So I had to defend myself. Your Honor, I'm very sorry, but I had to defend myself.
Unbelievable. I think one day we just have to get you on and go through some more stories because you have so many great stories. But guys, there he is, Bas Rutten. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Bas Rutten MMA, on Instagram as well. And pick up an O2 trainer today, o2trainer.com. Just quickly, Bas, before we wrap up, Receptor CBD oil, we know it's been helping a lot of people. Do you have any updates on that? Any good stories you can share with people as to, you know?
I feel like Nate Diaz needs to get on it because he's a big fan of the CBD oil.
Oh, it's great. Listen, there was this girl that we helped, you know, and Receptor works also with, there was another one, Charles Bennett. And there was this girl had 147 seizures a day. They gave the CBD. She had one that day, and it was over. So then I went with Receptra to a convention that they were doing, and I walked in, and there's like 800 pictures, all like 8x10 pictures, everywhere full. I go, wow, well, who are these kids? And they say, oh, they all had seizures. It's over. I go, you're serious? I mean, it was everywhere, all these pictures, and I go, wow. You know, can you imagine if you're a parent and you have a kid with all these seizures, and it actually happens right now here in America as well. There's some states where it's not legal, and they give it to their kids the only way to get the seizures away, and then the parents get locked up by the police because they give the kid cannabinoids. And I go like, this is insanity. You know, if the doctors would just do their homework, and they know, but they just want you to buy their drugs because they get money for that when they write a prescription. They don't want people to get cured. Come on now, there's no money in that. So let's do this. Let's say it's illegal. But, you know, Israel started this thing. They're really the forerunners right now on CBD. I saw a CBD documentary about it, like a 3-part documentary already like 2 or 3 years ago, and that got my attention. And then when I started using it with the Receptra, and I realized that if you add a little bit of THC, which I mean 0.5%, so it's nothing, you know, 1/200th part, then it activates the CBD. Sometimes when you only have CBD, I haven't found a brand yet that works for me. As soon as I tried the Receptor, because that's how I got in contact with them by accident, that worked, and I made a video about it, and we got in contact, and that's how the whole thing started. But it's a little bit of THC because in the plant, it's both together. So I think you needed to activate the CBD.
Wow. Well, everybody can check that out at receptornaturals.com/Bas-Rutten/. Check it out, Bas. Thank you so much for coming on our program, spending some time with us, braving the cold, and doing our first video interview. We really, really appreciate it.
Nice. All right, guys. Have fun there in the cold. Yeah, well, you guys, it's wintertime right now, Australia.
It's freezing. It's freezing right now as well, and it's early in the morning.
Okay. Well, have a good one. Good to have you. Too bad I can't see you, but I'll watch the show and I can see you.
Awesome.
Well, we'll come through and visit you sometime. We'll do a special in your house, and we'll bring some cigars with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. So Australia, do they have cigars in Australia?
Yeah. They don't have Cubans. I don't think. I don't know, to be honest. We're not cigar guys, but I don't know.
Okay.
When in Rome,
beer.
you know,
we have good beer though.
Okay.
We have good beer. So we might be able to blow your mind with some good beers. Let us surprise you if we come through. But thank you so much for your time, Bas. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, guys. Good job.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is one of the most polarizing figures in the welterweight division. Currently on the sweet 5-fight win streak, he takes on Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 225 for the interim welterweight belt. The #1 public enemy in Brazil, Colby Covington, welcome back to Submission Ready. And look at that, he's on the couch, comfortable and ready to go. How are you today, man?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having the king of Brazil and the GOAT of the welterweight division back.
Yeah, man, thank you so much. And we see you've got a sweet wine bottle in the background, so it's always a pleasure to have you back on the show, Colby. And, of course, another wild weekend in your life. Everybody saw you had a bit of an altercation with Charles Bennett at CamSoda Legends. Before we even get into it, talk us through it. How did it come about that you were at that event?
I got asked to be at that event from my friend Icy Mike and a guy named Bob, the owners of CamSoda. So, I went out to kind of support, and see what they got going on in the pro scene and, had a good time, hanging out with some porn stars, hanging out with chicks. That's what I do best. I got a different girl for each day of the week. So, I got to make sure I'm getting out there and meeting new chicks.
Wow, you're a little bit like Craig David. Tell us, what happened with this altercation with Charles Bennett? How did it all start? People have all these different crazy rumors. Apparently, some of it has to do with some kind of spoilers with Avengers. Others think there's some kind of beef between teams. How did it all happen?
The thing is, I'm the puppet master, and these are all my little puppets. So, of course, everybody's mad at the king. They want what I have. So, I don't pay attention to them. I don't got nothing to say about him. I'm not going to give him a spotlight or even talk about him because he's nothing. He doesn't mean anything to me, and he's just another nobody trying to make his name off me. So, I don't really got anything to say about that scrub.
Can I ask what was he saying to you when he got in your face? There's that video. It looked like you sort of, he threw the punch and you sort of pushed him away to get him back. What was he upset about?
Mike Perry was in the cage. He was running his mouth saying some shit. So I was kind of drawing back at him, telling him he's a bum. He just got knocked out by a guy I knocked out. So, I was letting Perry know the truth, that I am the king of the welterweight division. I'm fighting for big money. You're about to be fighting in Indian casinos by the end of the year. You're not even going to have a UFC job. And then all of a sudden, this dude comes up behind me, Crazy Horse, and he's fucking talking all this shit, saying he's going to fuck me up. So, I pushed his ass out of my face. And then he tried to swing a punch, and I dodged it because I have impeccable, reflexes. And, that was that. But, the guy's faker than fake. Oh, I'm so sorry, bro. I'm much respect. He's just looking for attention like you guys are giving him right now.
Wait, so he apologized to you afterwards? Did you see him afterwards?
Yeah, he tried to apologize to me and my coach, Mike Brown. He was like, oh, much respect, dude. Nothing but respect, It was just a publicity stunt. Look at you guys talking about it, He's trying to get back in the spotlight. The guy's a bum. He lost to an amateur that night. So, he's just looking for a way to keep his name out there and keep it hot.
Well, let's talk about the fact that it seems like, like you mentioned, #1 public enemy. We saw what happened with the Vadum incident. Do you feel like you have to kind of watch your back or look over your shoulder when you go to places now?
Yeah, for sure. I got to watch my back. All these freaking idiots out there that are faker than fake, I keep it real and they have a problem with that. So, that's what comes with the territory. I'm a super villain now. So, I got private security armed with me that I'll be at all events. It's my bad that I didn't have my security team with them at this event. I should have, but, this is a lesson learned over the weekend, and it's not going to happen again. Anytime I go to an event from now on, I will have armed security guards with me.
Who are the security? I heard you talking about how Dan Lambert sort of set it up. I'm wondering how much something like that costs, like a massive team, and who are they? Are they fighters? Are they sort of, hired professional security guards?
They're ex-Marines and
Wow.
former military type people. So, it's not a cheap ticket to get these guys to come with me and travel with me and go to places. But good thing my manager and agent, Dan Lambert, has all the money in the world. So that guy's wealthier than wealthy. So, the price tag is a cheap cost to protect the king.
Of course, and you got to make sure that you get to UFC 225 in one piece to have that fight. But two people that definitely do love you, of course, are the girls that keep popping up in your Twitter and Instagram feed. Our listeners will, without a doubt, know that they are the porn stars, Kelsey Monroe and Sophia Leone. How did you meet them and sort of team up with them?
I met him through my buddy Icy Mike.
Who is Icy Mike? He sounds like he's a porn producer or porn director. Is he?
Yeah, he's one of the top porn producers in the business, man. That guy's super successful. He's reinvented the game, man. That guy's that guy's insane, man. If you look him up, man, that guy's super smart and intelligent dude. And he's made a good business for himself and made a good life.
I guess a lot of people would be wondering, what's it like to spend a day with a couple of porn stars? Take us into that. What's it like hanging out with them? What's I suppose, a day like in the life of the king, Colby Covington?
Oh, it's amazing. There's something about hanging out with porn stars that's different than hanging out with regular chicks, because when you're hanging out with regular chicks, there's just so many emotions and drama and all this negative energy that I don't need before my title fight. So, when I'm hanging out with porn stars, it's just, we have our fun. We're living the dream. We're having, there's never a dull moment. And, and then that's that, there's no, after we get done having sex, there's no like, oh, you need to treat me good, take me to dinner, wine and dine me, this and that. No, it's just, it's on to the next day. I get to get back to training and focusing on my world title fight. They get back to their business and we go about our business. So, it's good, man. I'm living the dream out here, the American dream. I am raw American steel and twisted sex appeal.
You're like the Charlie Sheen of MMA. I remember Charlie Sheen sort of talking about like his relationship with the porn stars. I mean, maybe minus the hard drugs and all that kind of stuff. Any fun stories you can share with us, Colby?
I mean, I had a foursome the other night. I never thought I would be in a foursome.
Did you really?
That was awesome. Yeah, and I'm not talking with any dudes. I'm talking with 3 different chicks. So
wow,
that was awesome. I had a couple threesomes in my day, with 2 different chicks, but 3 different chicks, man, that was insane, man. They were all fucking working. It was amazing.
And it was with the porn stars. So they had the high quality girls as well.
Yeah, these aren't just any porn stars. These are the cream of the crop. King Colby doesn't mess around. When I go for the porn stars, I go for the girls that are the high ups, man. I'm not going for the little peasants, man. I'm aiming high. So, these are celebrities and super famous porn stars. So, I enjoy having good weekends with them every now and then.
It's interesting as well because it's almost like a part of your training camp. I imagine having 3 women at once, that must be quite a workout.
That's the thing. Like, people don't realize. They think I'm not focused. They're like, oh, you need to focus on RDA and your title fight in Chicago. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm having sex with 3 different porn stars. Do you know what type of cardio that takes? Because you can't just give them 10 minutes. Man, you got to be putting it in and pounding that and laying the pipe for like a good hour. So, I mean, I'm constantly moving and flexing my testosterone on them for an hour straight. I mean, dude, this is the best cardio I could ever get for 5 rounds. RDA is not going to last past 3.
Yeah, wow. And you got to be very limber for that as well, so you get in the flexibility. This is going to be like the best version of Colby we've seen yet. But looking at the actual fight, the rumors were this fight was originally supposed to be in Brazil for UFC 224, which is what, like a week or 2 away. Was that ever official? Did you ever get a contract saying UFC 224? And did you ever go as far as signing that contract?
Yeah, my contract was signed and sealed for UFC 224 in Brazil. But as soon as I got to that press conference in Brooklyn, they decided to switch it up, with all the Conor fiasco. They said that, they didn't want this great, glorious day in American history to happen in Brazil. They wanted it to happen on U.S. soil. So, the filthy animals in Brazil didn't deserve it.
Are you partly disappointed that it's in Brazil? I mean, we imagine it would be, if someone like you, sort of fun to go into enemy territory and possibly become champion there in front of them.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed, I mean, first off, I got the biggest steel balls in the organization. No one would be willing to put their life on the line to go back there, but that's just how crazy I am upstairs. I'm crazy, man. I'm certified OG in this game, and I'll go anywhere. I don't care if I had death threats. I had a couple bounties on my head. A couple of the favelas and the gang leaders put a bounty on my head. I heard it was like 50 grand, and that's like people would lose their life over there to get 50 grand. So, I didn't care, man. I wanted to, I'm an entertainment show. I wanted to go over there and give the crowd and the fans around the world something to cry about. It was going to be the Snowflake Armageddon.
What did the UFC think of that when they heard, these bounties? I mean, obviously, they moved the fight to a different event, but, did you get any frantic calls from the UFC about that?
Yeah, I think as soon as they realized that there was bounties on my head and people in Brazil in that third world dump are like literally would put their life on the line to kill me, I think they realized that, it probably wasn't smart for me to go back there, and the security guards that were going to be teaming up with me, I mean, and the UFC was going to provide me with their own security. I don't think they wanted to put those guys' lives in jeopardy as well. So, they finally made the right choice. They wanted this glorious moment in American history to be on U.S. soil. And what better way to go than to go from where Michael Jordan used to play basketball in the United Center. because I am cut from the same cloth as Michael Jordan, and I'm going to dunk my nuts on RDA's face on June 9th live on pay-per-view.
Wow. Tell us, what was your reaction when you found out that you'd actually be fighting RDA? Because I know you've been on this show a few times before. You've been calling him out for a really, really long time. Were you surprised that he actually agreed to fight you?
I wasn't surprised because, I had been chasing him for a while. We were supposed to fight in Singapore like a year ago, and he didn't want to fight me on that. So they ended up putting me up higher on the card. They put him on the prelims because he was ducking me. And then, I've been campaigning for this fight for a while. This fight's made sense for a long time. But, the reason I'm not surprised is because they had to sweeten the pot. I knew they're giving it pay-per-view points to come out and fight me. And he wasn't going to fight me unless he was getting pay-per-view points. But, at the end of the day, Dana knows what's best for business, and I am best for business. So, they had to make this fight come together because little Woodley is being a little crybaby gossip bitch in Hollywood, gossiping about the Kardashians on TMZ. So, he's not fighting anytime soon. So they had to get King Colby, and they had to get RDA to finally man up, and they had to sweeten the pot for him to actually sign the dotted line.
He's obviously got his own agenda as well. He said that he wants to expose you at UFC 225. And he basically claimed that, in his opinion, you act differently when the cameras are on versus when the cameras are off, referencing the press conference. What did you make of that comments and of those comments, and obviously him saying that he wants to expose you?
It's the same RDA that we've come to know. He's a fake dude. I mean, look at his followers. I mean, he paid to buy all these followers, these fake followers. So, I mean, everything the guy says, you can't trust or believe anything the guy says. The guy's full of shit, I mean, he's from Brazil. That's for one thing, Everybody knows that all those people lie and cheat on their wives and cheat on their taxes over there anyways. So, but, those comments, I don't really take too much into those comments. This is who I am. I've never changed. This is who I've always been. This is just me. So if you don't like me for who I am, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
What do you think are the chances that you get into his head and sort of affect him mentally going into this fight?
I'm already inside his head. I can see at the press conference, he's trying to wear a boomerang shirt to get under my skin. That doesn't affect me. That's the same boomerang that came back around and knocked Werdum unconscious in London from Volkov. So who knows if Werdum's even woken up from that nap. I don't think Werdum's woken up from that nap yet. So, RDA, I'm definitely in his head, and he's going to fight emotional on June 9th, and he's going to try and prove a point for his Brazilian country. But, he's just going to get the same effect that Damian Maia and Dong Hum Kim got. I'm going to delete his legacy, and he's going to be motionless in the octagon on June 9th.
I almost feel like this rivalry is a lot more... This is probably your most intense one thus far, a lot more intense than the Damian Maia one, because that was somewhat one-sided. Damian didn't really want to play the game. RDA is at least trying to play the game. Do you like that? And what are you sort of expecting from Fight Week? Obviously, you're a professional, but what do you think it's going to be like, being around him, being at Media Day? I imagine you guys will probably do a press conference. There's going to be the weigh-ins, the stare-downs, all that kinds of things. Are you looking forward to that as much almost as to the fight?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I already looked in his soul down in Brooklyn at that press conference. I can see how scared he is, and you guys are going to find out the truth on June 9th. I mean, the guy's this shit in his pants. He knows that his career is coming to an end on June 9th, and I'm going to be the guy to do it. So, it's going to be fun. I enjoy the process, man. I love the promotion. I love this stuff, man. I'm a marketing machine, so I enjoy getting out there for Fight Week, looking at him in his little pussy eyes and seeing how scared he is, and I will expose him for what he really is on June 9th.
What do you think about the fact that this is for the interim title? Obviously, a lot of people are criticizing it because Woodley's not out for that long, but then, you had all these issues trying to get together with him to fight him, and it was a little bit murky as to when he was going to come back. What do you think about the criticisms that people say, oh, there's no need for an interim title?
This isn't for the interim. This is for the undisputed UFC welterweight championship of the world. I mean, go look at Tyron Woodley's track record. I mean, he claims his biggest claim right now is, I defended my title 4 times in a year. Go look at Sherdog right now and tell me how many times he's fought in the last 3 years. Oh, yeah, that's right. He's only fought 4 times in 3 years. So he's averaging 1 fight a year. Okay, that's a joke. That's not what a champion is. He's out here faking shoulder injuries. I mean, if he was really hurt, why didn't he get the shoulder surgery right after Damian Maia? And then if he's really hurt, why was he ducking me at UFC 219 in Vegas when they had to put Cyborg? He was ready to fight Nate Diaz, and they offered him Colby Covington. Dana White said, hey, you and Colby for the undisputed crown at UFC 219 in Vegas at the end of the year show. Oh, no, I'm not fighting Colby. I'll fight Nate Diaz, but I'm not fighting Colby. Nate Diaz, that guy's a lightweight. He's inactive. He's not even fighting. Why are you trying to fight him? Oh, if I'm not fighting Nate Diaz, I'm not fighting Colby. I'm getting shoulder surgery. So, you know, all these people that are little snowflakes are just mad that I'm fighting for a title and I'm getting paid a buttload of money to fight for the title. So, you know, that's why the criticism coming. You know, if I saved a baby from a burning building, they would still find a way to criticize me.
It's funny that you mentioned the whole Nate Diaz saga, because just this morning there are rumors that Nate Diaz will be coming possibly back at UFC 227, and one of the names that has sort of been thrown around is Tyron Woodley. So what would your reaction be if you became the interim champion, but then Woodley still went on to fight Nate Diaz instead of defend his title against you?
Everybody knows I'm the draw now. I don't need Woodley, man. Woodley's gonna be begging for me. He's got baby mamas to pay off. He ain't just got one baby mama, so he's got bills to pay. So he's going to be begging for Colby Chaos Covington. But I don't need Tyron Woodley, man. I could fight Khabib. I could fight GSP. I'd go fight Whitaker, man. I'm a big welterweight. You know, I can make 55 or middleweight. So I'm not worried about Tyron Woodley. If he fights Nate Diaz, you know, he might as well just leave that undisputed belt at my feet because he knows he's scared of me. We've trained together. I left him unconscious in the gym. He doesn't want to tell the world the real story why he doesn't want to fight me. So, you know, I'm not chasing Tyron Woodley. That little bitch is going to be chasing me.
What is that going to mean?
And about those reports, that's fake news.
What will that mean for you? Sort of, you know, beating Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 225 and having that belt wrapped around your waist. Have you thought much about that moment?
No, I haven't really thought too much of it because, you know, that's what I expect. You know, it's not going to be a big deal because, you know, if it's a big deal, then that means you didn't expect to do it. So, you know, I expect to do it. So it's not going to be a big deal for me. It's just going to be another day at the office.
It's interesting that you mentioned Khabib's name before as well, because it looks like he might be eyeing a move to 170 in the future. Not in his next fight, but in the near future. We know he struggles with his weight cuts. Have you been impressed with his run lately? And how would you see his style translating into your division with so many grapplers and wrestlers, really good grapplers and wrestlers like yourself?
Yeah, I haven't been impressed. I mean, he couldn't finish a real estate agent. That's just sad as it is. So, you know, his style is one-dimensional. He can't strike. He doesn't have jiu-jitsu. All he does is go forward with pressure and try and take guys down. You're not taking down an all-American wrestler like myself. I don't get taken down. You have a better shot to hit the lottery than take me down. So, you know, if Khabib comes to welterweight, he's going to get sent down and he's going to get a swirly, just like all the other nerds. No nerd is safe right now. I'm taking lunch money. I'm giving wedgies and swirlies. It's Nerd Bash 2018.
Would you want that Khabib fight, especially just because of how big of a name he is at the moment? You know, he's sort of got a lot of momentum, and just to sort of prove your point about, you know, him not belonging at 170 as well.
Yeah, I would love that fight. You know, I'd go fight him in Russia. I'd love to go fight him in Russia. I think.
Imagine the security you need in Russia.
Yeah, it's a good thing I got armed security guards and Dan Lambert to pay for him. So, you know, I'd love to go to Russia. I'd expose him. Honestly, he's one-dimensional, and you know, his style. It's not going to fit well for welterweight. You know, it's good for lightweights. He can overpower those guys, but you're not going to overpower welterweights. You have to have different skill set up at this weight division.
All right. Well, we're excited for UFC 225. Give us your prediction quickly. How do you think this fight finishes between you and RDA?
Spoiler alert, June 9th at the United Center. RDA is going to get left in a stretcher, second round, KO. He's leaving the octagon in a stretcher, and I'm leaving on my private jet back to South Beach to all my hoes and all my beautiful women in South Beach with 10 pounds of gold around King Colby's waist.
I love it. I love it. He is the king of spoilers. Star Wars, Avengers, Infinity War, and now the spoiler for UFC 225. Guys, don't forget to check out Colby Covington take out Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 225. June 9th. It's going to be June 10th here in Australia and New Zealand because of the time difference. It's going to be for the interim UFC welterweight belt. And of course, don't forget to follow the man, if you dare, at Colby Cov MMA on Twitter and Instagram. Great follow. A lot of fun stuff and very, very active and a lot of fun pictures. If you like pictures of not only Colby Covington, but also porn stars, let's be honest, who doesn't? There's another reason to follow. So Colby, thank you so much for your time, man. Always appreciate it. And good luck at UFC 225.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
Our next guest is known for his amazing work exploring the intersection between politics and sports. You know him from his amazing work as an editor in Bloody Elbow and his work across Deadspin, Bleacher Report, and lots more. It's a pleasure. It feels like this guy hasn't been on the show for way too long, so it's a huge pleasure to welcome back Karim Zidan to Submission Radio. Karim, welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you.
Oh, and it's great to be back. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me on, guys.
It's always good when you come on, man. The fans have been demanding it. They're saying, get Karim back on the show. Let's talk Russian MMA. Let's talk geopolitics. And it's just the perfect timing because, of course, Fedor Emelianenko returned this past weekend. Khabib's doing big things, so we figured it's a perfect time to have you on the show. So let's kick it off with this, man. What did you think of Fedor versus Frank Mir? What did you think of the Fedor that you saw? And, of course, Fedor getting a big win, somewhat in signature Fedor style.
Oh, I'll tell you what. I sat down with my fiance. I was like, hey, my Fedor is watching. And the first year we started dating was the year he lost to Fabricio Verdun.
Oh, wow.
So it was like a curse thing. I'm like, come see if you're going to actually break this curse and Fedor might actually win this time.
Yeah.
So he sat down. Within 50 seconds, she turned. She's like, well, I guess I broke the curse. And it was one of those moments where the fan in me, the fan of Fedor, was celebrating. But, man, he didn't look good in that beginning of the fight.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me, right? The chin's not there. It just so happened that Frank Mir has an even worse chin. So that's really what it came down to, I think. But it was still, like you said, a signature win for Fedor. So it's a little different there. And I don't know. I don't know what it says about his next fight. I can't believe we're even in the position where we're talking about Fedor versus Chael Sonnen. This is what 2018 has brought us, guys. I don't know what to say, really.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But if you kind of have to come up with an opponent for Fedor, and you're right, you know, who knows what his chin's like. He didn't look the greatest at the start of the fight, and we've seen what he's looked like in the last few fights. But if you could go into the lab and put together an opponent that probably, you know, won't destroy him too much when it comes to brain damage and punch him in the face too much, Chael Sonnen's probably a good matchup for him next, don't you think, Karim?
Yeah, well, maybe we won't be sweating, and maybe we won't see him look the way he looked after that Maldonado fight, at least. I mean, his head had swelled up to twice its normal size then. That was just frightening to look at.
Yeah.
I think he had just turned 40 then as well. It was just awful, really, just looking back at that fight now.
Yeah.
So anything that keeps him away from that, I think I'm good with at this point.
As a Fedor fan, that was, I mean, there's a lot of tough ones to watch. The Bigfoot fight, the Dan Henderson fight, that one definitely really, really tough to watch. But I guess one of the most interesting things, and one of the reasons that we wanted to get you on, was the news swirling and surrounding Fedor leading into this fight, and also, you know, discussed afterwards, was the fact that FBI came and questioned Fedor Emelianenko leading into the fight. Now, I'm not really, you know, within the clique. I can't imagine they were going to go over there just to get an autograph with arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. Maybe that's it. Maybe they were just like, look, we couldn't get tickets. This is the only way we could get an autograph. But in all, you know, realisticness, what do you think they wanted to ask Fedor about? If you had to sort of guess what they wanted to question him about, obviously people are saying, you know, to do with Vladimir Putin and, of course, Donald Trump. But what actual questions do you think they'd want to know from Fedor?
All right, so I think it's important, as you mentioned, that we know that everything we're going to have to say here will be speculation, only because the FBI does not comment on a potential investigation. That's just a standard statement they give out. Jerry Millen hasn't really gone into any sort of detail about it, refuses to divulge exactly what Fedor discussed with the agents, and Fedor is not going to be saying anything. So at this point, it's guesswork, but I mean, we have some educated guesses we can go with here. And I think the thing that ties this all together is Michael Cohen. Yes, Michael Cohen, the person who's in the news, and pretty much anybody. I mean, sure, if you're a sports fan, if you're just looking at the news, you should know this person's name by now. The current United States President Donald Trump's fix-it guy, his pit bull, his loyal confidant, his personal lawyer. I mean, the list goes on with the titles, basically. The person who's known to have paid hush money to a porn star that the president allegedly had an affair with. So that's somehow it's come to this point, Dennis and guys. It's come to this point that we're tying in this news story to MMA, and even I, with all the crazy stories that I've come on Submission Radio and talked to you guys about, I never thought this was going to happen. Truly, I never thought this connection would ever be made. I actually never really I wasn't part of the sport in the time Affliction was running. So the fact that Michael Cohen was actually COO, so the chief operating officer of Affliction Entertainment, something I was not even aware of until this past couple of weeks when I started looking into him and figuring this story out and understanding the ties that now come in with Donald Trump himself and Fedor and Putin. So I'm going to have to break this down step by step for those who aren't exactly aware.
And I was going to say, for those who aren't aware, maybe just explain also Donald Trump's involvement in Affliction as well. I'm assuming you were probably already going to do that.
Yes. I was going to take this step by step and start with So the report that came out was that the FBI came and knocked on Fedor's door and questioned him. That's as far as we know what happened. And apparently they were also in attendance for the fights on Saturday. So for whatever reason, they felt the need to show up more than once, which was even more interesting.
Now I'm starting to believe Casper's theory about the tickets, Karim.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. At this point, it's you never know. Maybe they were just coming to watch.
Strong theory.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I love it. It looked like Fedor was on top of Frank Mir, like going for some of the ground and pound submissions, and the FBI just jump in, like, all right, this is the perfect time. We must ask you questions now. If you're free, do you have a couple of seconds? But no, go on, Karim.
So the original reports stated that Fedor has friends in high places. Now, I really don't want to nitpick on the difference here, but he's referring that report was referring to the fact that that Fedor is supposedly friends with both Donald Trump, so President of the United States, and Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, which is a very, very interesting position to be in this sort of geopolitical climate that we're in. Truth be told, if I had to actually break it down myself based on what the knowledge I've gathered over the past few years, meeting Fedor, asking these sort of questions to both him and Vadim, he is neither a friend. He's not a friend to either of them. But yes, he is indeed an associate in the sense that there was an affiliation and a tie and a relationship of sort, even if it's limited to a working relationship. So when it comes to, say, let's start with Putin. With Putin, back in 2011, 2012, sure, Fedor had already passed his prime, but Russian MMA hadn't sort of peaked yet. It wasn't a popular sport. As a matter of fact, it wasn't legal until 2012. But Fedor himself was still considered an icon and someone that Putin enjoyed watching. He was Putin's favorite fighter, as has been put down on record before. But Putin actually ended up not hiring him, but basically bringing him on and requesting that he help him with his presidential campaign in 2012. And this is at a point when Putin was quite unpopular. So if you remember, Putin was actually booed at an M1 event after a Fedor fight. And that was during the time where Putin was very unpopular. It's funny enough, Putin ends up using Fedor for the presidential campaign, and that sort of turns the tide. It's not like there was any chance Putin was ever going to lose, but he won with a slightly higher percentage, possibly because of Fedor. At the very least, it was something that helped sort of rehabilitate his image at the time. So that's a very interesting position to be in. And Fedor was rewarded with a position on the Sports and Fitness Council, replacing Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev at the time, and all sorts of other things. He became the president of the Russian MMA Union, a position he still has. The sport was legalized. So as you can see, there was a lot of you scratch my back, I scratch yours. But that doesn't happen now. In Putin's last election, Fedor wasn't involved. There's no real connection there. If you don't hear Putin speaking of him, you don't hear Fedor speaking of Putin. As a matter of fact, if you remember, I came on to discuss the child MMA issue, this whole scandal that happened when Chechen dictator Ramzan Kadyrov decided to have his sons fight a few other kids, basically in the cage. And Fedor was one of the few people who spoke out. He ended up being silenced by the Kremlin because the Kremlin refused to actually punish Kadyrov for this as they would, because it's technically illegal in Russia and was broadcast on national television. Kadyrov got nothing, not even a slap on the wrist, while Fedor was silenced immediately, and his influence was lost at that point. So that's a significant thing to consider. So there's no necessary friendship there, but you have to think that the FBI potentially asked about his friendship or his association or affiliation to Vladimir Putin, if there is one, if he's ever had that similar interaction with Donald Trump. Now, here's where we jump into Donald Trump before I get into more of this FBI stuff. When Fedor in 2008 joined Affliction Entertainment, one of the people who was part of this joint venture was Donald Trump. This was a year after he shaved Vince McMahon's head at WrestleMania, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was 2007 and Affliction's 2008.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on this necessarily, but I'm pretty sure that that's the date. So what's funny is you have the person who's now the president of the United States was part of a promotion, an MMA promotion, and Fedor Emelianenko, Putin's favorite fighter, was fighting for it at the same time. So you either have a situation that's complete circumstance or coincidence, or you're onto something, you know, and it's very difficult to tell which it is. But Donald Trump was sort of promoting Fedor because he called him an instrument of death, if I'm not mistaken, or brilliant at inflicting death. That was one of the quotes he used, and was really big on promoting Fedor. Wanted to do a whole reality TV show in St. Petersburg during this time in affliction, all surrounding Fedor. That never came to fruition. But there was some interest in Fedor. He sort of gravitated towards him the way people did around Mike Tyson at the time when he was very big. Fedor had that sort of mystique around him.
Mm.
And Donald Trump probably wanted to rub like get a bit of that rub, but it doesn't go far beyond that. We don't even have actual confirmation if Donald Trump truly invested his own personal money. I know there are reports out there that he invested his own personal money in affliction, but even that is not absolutely confirmed. So we enter very murky waters, and I mean, you have to imagine that ever since the 2016 presidential campaign, no one from Donald Trump's side has been speaking about MMA at all. So that's not something they want to discuss at all, because again, there's that slight association to Russia through Fedor Emelianenko and through the fact that Trump said in an interview that he wanted to go to Russia to film this reality TV show with Fedor Emelianenko. So you've got this rotating affair between the United States, Russia, and Fedor Emelianenko, and the links are Trump, Putin, Fedor. So he's clearly got some sort of affiliation with both Trump and Putin. So that's something that the FBI easily would have come forward and said, well, do you think that they've had any interactions? Have you helped facilitate an interaction between the two of them? That could be a potential question, because one of the things that, believe it or not, the Hillary Clinton campaign actually put out a mini documentary stating that Fedor Emelianenko was one of the links between Trump and Russia.
Wow.
I know. That was one of the many things that they tried to list at the time as part of the ties to Russia. And I find that one to be reaching, to be honest, because as I've tried to explain here, yes, there is clearly an affiliation of sorts, but Fedor is not a middleman or a assistant to Vladimir Putin, nor do I think Trump could have used far more significant people to go through to Putin if he wanted to, if he hasn't himself anyway at the time. I don't think Fedor happened to be in that position at that time. I don't necessarily think that what the Hillary Clinton campaign put out at the time, saying that he's the actual link and something that could be considered. But you know what? The FBI probably looked into all this and decided, this is something that we want to look at, and probably potentially question him about if he maybe facilitated some sort of meeting or discussion or passed on a comment from one to the other. I don't know. It's difficult to tell. Again, like I said, we're in very murky waters here. Now, to make things even more complicated, this person who right now is in a lot of hot water with the FBI and had his office raided, Michael Cohen, who's Trump's personal lawyer and confidant, was actually also a part of Affliction Entertainment at the time as the chief operating officer. Another person who was promoting Fedor Emelianenko and was clearly in the same room as Fedor at different points throughout that year and a bit that Affliction survived. So if the FBI raided Michael Cohen's office in the start of April, it's not too much of a surprise that they would question pretty much anyone who's had any sort of interaction with Michael Cohen, especially if it links him to Russia in any way. And Fedor Emelianenko just so happens to be one of the most famous athletes out of Russia, who just so happens to know both President Trump and Michael Cohen. It's the most ridiculous story I think I've ever told on this show, honestly. I really do. And I've said some crazy stuff about Dagestan and Chechnya. I mean, come on. People just have to search my name in this show, and the list of crazy stories is there that have been said on this show. And this is by far the most ridiculous one. And I don't mean ridiculous as in it's entirely false. That's not what I mean at all. I mean ridiculous as in it's stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You couldn't write this. If somebody wrote this in a movie and we watched it 10 years ago, we'd say, hey, man, I think you're a little bit too zany with the script writing here. There's no way anything like this could happen. But just quickly, while we're still on Fedor, before we move on to the next thing, just talking about something, I guess we're still speculating about this, but his fighting future, from your perspective, how much longer do you think he'll fight on for? For example, if he does win this tournament with Bellator, do you think he may consider calling it quits after that win, or do you think he's still looking to fight for quite some time?
It's a very interesting question. I haven't had any interactions with the Fedor camp for a while, So anything, again, I would say would be personal opinion here. And I say, unless he takes a significant beating in any of his upcoming fights, say as he's continuing his way through this Grand Prix, unless he does take significant damage, I think we might be seeing him fight for a few more years still, especially if he especially at a one fight a year pace, if he's getting paid. The key to Fedor is, and always has been, fighting at the right price. So if someone's willing to pay him the $1 million+ that he asks for per fight, then he's going to fight, unless he's taking significant damage. But I think he's at a stage in his, especially the way he appears and the way, what I've heard from people over the past few years, is he seems to be in a happier place when it comes to fighting. Like, there's a load off his chest now. Seems that losing honestly might have changed Fedor's perspective on fighting. Because as much as he says it was not such a big deal, I personally think that it was still a weight. Maybe he felt that if he lost, he would disappoint all sorts of people. Maybe if it wasn't even a personal disappointment to himself, it might have been a disappointment to Russia, etc. Maybe now that he's not as influential, maybe now that Khabib Nurmagomedov has actually maybe usurped him or taken that mantle from him now, then maybe Fedor can just enjoy himself without the same sort of scrutiny he's had before. Just maybe. That's my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of validity to that theory. It makes a lot of sense. You mentioned Khabib. How big do you think sort of his star growing has been for Russia? I mean, we see some of the videos of him entering airports and coming back home and, you know, just being swamped by fans and spectators and people. Do you feel like he is the new Fedor? Can you really... I mean, look, I know people say that in a sort of anecdotal way, but do you think his, I guess, pull is the same as Fedor's in his prime? And if not, what do you think it would take for him to sort of reach that? Because the other thing is, from my understanding, I think you've said this, you know, to us before, people in Russia, they're not necessarily UFC fans, they're more MMA fans. So I wonder sort of, you know, if you're not that familiar with not so much the sport, but the actual brand of a certain company, how much does it mean for, you know, your guy to be their champion, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think we have to think about it in multiple ways. Fedor had this mystique to him, but I think at the end of the day, he was, especially in Russia, he was not as big a star as he could have been had the sport been legal and widely accepted in Russia and on television at the time. Now, had that been the case and all his fights were broadcast on TV, I think Fedor would go down as one of the biggest Russian celebrities of all time. But I don't think that's the case, only because really at the tail end of his career, the sport was legalized when he became took more of a role on the administrative side. And actually he retired from the sport for a while. That's when the sport was legalized in Russia. That's when it really made it on TV. That's when the UFC got a TV deal in Russia. That's when gyms were opening all over the place. That's when people like Ramzan Kadyrov started to get into the sport. That's the level of popularity that came with the sport at the time. So if we look on those terms alone, one must assume that Khabib is more popular than Fedor, just because of the amount of people who can see him and who would know him in comparison to the amount of people who in the 90s and in the early 2000s would have known Fedor Emelianenko. I mean, you would have really needed YouTube at the time in Russia or something of the sorts, which is, if I was in Egypt or something at the time, which is where I would have been during Fedor's time, the only way I would have watched it was on YouTube, and it was an obscure thing that 1 in every 100 people would have known. I think it wouldn't have been too far off in Russia. I mean, the fact that he was Russian helps in facilitating more viewers from his own home country, but still, it's nothing like the level of celebrity Khabib is receiving right now. I mean, this is someone who is even taking pictures with Cristiano Ronaldo, and we're talking like big-time A-lister athletes and celebrities believe in this guy, and that's not something that Fedor ever really got. The only pictures you really see with Fedor like that is when he's around dictators and stuff like Putin. The only time you see Fedor with celebrities was when he was sitting and having a dinner with Putin, and he was sitting with Jean-Claude Van Damme and a couple of other people that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But that's the only time you really see Fedor doing that, and he stayed very much to himself in Stario School. But Khabib has been in the spotlight a lot more because of his star power in North America. The fact that he's built himself outside of Russia, I think, is very significant, because he ends up not just representing the standard ethnic Russian through that. He ends up more or less presenting the version of Russia that he comes from, right? Because Khabib is Dagestani at the end of the day, and for anyone who's read my work over the past few years will note the difference between someone from the North Caucasus, that region that includes Dagestan and Chechnya and Ingushetia, versus people who come from a Moscow or an Orenburg or more Slavic Russian, and that specific look that most Americans associate with a Russian. Khabib Nurmagomedov doesn't match that at all, and the fact that people have been able to celebrate someone who's not the standard Russian, I think adds to his celebrity in Russia, and not just among the average Russian citizen in a place like Orenburg or Moscow, but it magnifies significantly among Muslim minority groups within Russia and in the surrounding post-Soviet states. So he has huge popularity in places like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Like, he's incredibly popular among these Muslim countries because at the end of the day, he is the first ever world champion, because they'll consider, even if they don't think the UFC is the biggest thing, or maybe they don't necessarily follow the brand itself, they understand that the UFC being the biggest organization means this is the true world championship, because that's the way it will be translated in Russia. At the end of the day, he is the first Muslim world champion, and that is a significant thing, especially at times like this. So his celebrity is humongous right now, and we're talking about millions and millions and millions of people in various countries. This goes beyond Fedor, in my personal opinion. Khabib Nurmagomedov is a giant star, and I don't think the UFC can ever truly reap the maximum financial benefits from this, because they can't ever end up in places like Uzbekistan and stuff. They're never going to reap that sort of it's never going to turn into, it's not always going to be monetary is what I'm trying to say. But Khabib's star power is humongous. Whether it translates to pay-per-view, I think with the right fight, as we're seeing right now, one of the fights people are clamoring for is a fight against Conor McGregor. And now,
that would never happen in Russia, would it?
Oh, I personally don't believe that would happen. I mean, this is taking us on a whole different tangent right now. If I get into that right now, it's up to you guys if you want me to get into this right now. But I don't think the fight could possibly happen in Russia, just because the stakes are too high for them to risk going to a place where they won't make the same amount of money they would in North America. That's basic economics, and just business acumen means it's impossible for them to decide to go to Russia over somewhere in the United States, someplace like somewhere in New York or in Las Vegas, where they know they can make money, and they know this fight will sell on pay-per-view, and they know they can put it at the standard time that is the formulaic UFC system that they know they can make money off. It's never going to happen that way in Russia.
I was going to say, yeah, just for those, because, we hear people say that, you won't necessarily make money in Russia. Can you just explain that for us? Because my I guess, understanding of it, my limited understanding would be, first of all, there's the time difference. That's one problem. Second of all is media, right? If you get all the media from America, it's very easy for them to go to Vegas or New York or, Los Angeles or whatever. It's a lot harder to get, all this media to travel to, say, a place like Russia. And of course, the UFC trying to make all their money off pay-per-view, you're not going to necessarily get all this media, you're not necessarily going to get all this kind of promotion. The pay-per-view numbers might suffer because of that. And then, of course, there's the fact that, from our understanding, is the TV deal in Russia the UFC has is a pretty weak one. They're not really making a lot of money off it. And if that's the case, then maybe the people in Russia aren't as familiar with the product. Are those sort of the reasons why they wouldn't make the money, or is there something I'm missing?
You've listed a lot of very
Casper went through in detail. I have a very limited understanding, but let me explain exactly why. Just to add to that question, Karim, because Casper's answered most of it, what is the draw for them to go to Russia?
Yeah,
that's the big question, because Casper sort of outlined why they won't be making any money. But we know, Roy Jones Jr., for example, a lot of these athletes want to get into Russia, want to get into Russian business. So is there a hidden thing here that we're not seeing why the UFC is so interested in going to Russia?
I think it's an optics thing, first and foremost. The idea that they can go into Khabib Nurmagomedov's country, basically, even though going to Moscow is not going to Khabib Nurmagomedov's country. But let's put that aside for a moment. It's the optics of the idea that they could put a massive fight on in a stadium in Moscow, which there are plenty of stadiums to go around, and that they could fill that up with a bunch of people who hate Conor McGregor, or just the fact that it could be so tense on one side, just that sort of that's the optics behind it. But if they think that there's true money in having the fight over there, I just don't understand how that's possible. They lose out on the fact that there's massive issues when it comes to the currency exchange, a recession going on in Russia, sanctions. Let's not even get into the list of sanctions that have gone in this year, and the current tension between the United States and Russia, and the fact that embassies are being shut down and consulates are being shut down in both the United States and Russia. Staff members are being fired, and people can't even get visas on time. Like the visa services have decreased significantly, to the fact that the Russian wrestling team wasn't able to come to the World Cup in Iowa this year. Now, that's a very, very, very significant thing, because wrestling diplomacy has always been a key thing between these nations, and the fact that the United States didn't get the visas done for them is very significant about the sort of athlete relationship that's left, and how that even that is dissolving between the United States and Russia. And the UFC thinks they're going to hold a significant event, something on that magnitude, the return of Conor McGregor. Say this is McGregor's first fight back. He hasn't fought in nearly 2 years now. So say this is truly his first fight back. Imagine that this first fight back is in Russia and that they don't make the money that they're expecting. Because they can't get the live gate that they would be able to in North America, anywhere in North America. The fact that they'd have to comp so many more people, the issues that they would have with the Russian underground deciding that they want to be a part of this event. What if Ramzan Kadyrov decides he wants to be a part of the event, which is not out? People would say, "Oh, here's Karim bringing Ramzan Kadyrov into the conversation again." No, truth be told, he has attended all the biggest boxing shows that have taken place in Moscow over the past while. Anything with Alexander Povetkin, etc. He has attended those events, and not only does he attend the events, he actually ends up being a part of the broadcast sometimes. They bring him in to start asking him questions and talk about his love for boxing. This is a real thing that happens on Russian national television. So if, in case people think it's too far-fetched an idea for Ramzan Kadyrov to be a part of the UFC broadcast, remember the fact that Russians are also going to be, the Match TV, the Russian sports station, will also be broadcasting from within the stadium, so they'll have the rights to broadcasting it in Russia, which means if they want Ramzan Kadyrov on screen, he's going to be on screen. It's not the UFC's choice there, and the UFC will never say no to him. So they're running into not only a whole PR disasters, economic issues, political issues in terms of just getting visas and stuff because of sanctions. I can't think of a single good reason, truly, other than a reason like optics. Literally, that's the only thing I could come up with was optics, and the idea that this would be a storyline that they could sell. But other than that, I can't think of a single truly good reason why they would go to Russia for such a big fight. This is not to say Khabib can't fight in Russia, but even that, I think, is a waste of money. Truly, because I think Khabib is a much bigger draw in the United States for the UFC. Now we're talking financially. If you want to just waste your time and let him fight for free somewhere, or pay his purse but don't worry about what you make in return, sure, throw him in Russia. People will eat it up. Of course, people want to go see. But here's the truth about Russian MMA. Most of it's provided for free. No one pays anything for pay-per-view in Russia. You're not going to teach people to start paying for pay-per-view. And I, as someone who did commentary for M1, can tell you a whole bunch of seats and all these Russian MMA events are comped tickets, which means they are free tickets. So expect the same for a UFC event. People are not used to paying for their sports like that in Russia, especially MMA. The UFC is going to lose a lot of money if they take anything more than a Fight Pass show there. Then again, Khabib is still a massive star, so that's something. They have to take advantage of it somehow. But
maybe have him as a guest fighter or something, or guest commentator or something like that. That's interesting.
Absolutely. But to have him fight there, that's, I mean, it's a terrible idea, in my opinion. It's a terrible idea.
Sure, and I know some people, Karim, you're so against this, but the reasons you're outlining, they're more economic. They're more from a business perspective. It's not a personal thing. It's not like, hey, we wouldn't love to see Khabib fight there. It's purely from the UFC as a business and business sense. It doesn't make sense. So what are you expecting from this show in September, though, or the rumored show in September? Because, you know, I've heard people say, you know, sort of, some sources say, oh no, it's going to be a pay-per-view, it's going to be a big pay-per-view. But if you're going to do a pay-per-view, the UFC, who are they going to put on there? Who's going to be at the top of the card? I mean, the biggest Russian that I can think of, not Khabib, would be Volkov for a potential title shot. But it seems like that'd be a really, really quick turnaround for either DC or Stipe. So it seems like it's going to be a Fight Pass event. But then there's the TV deal. Does that need to improve before that happens? Because, like I mentioned before, I heard the TV deal in Russia isn't very good for the UFC. And then you got to think Kadyrov, if what you say is true, will probably be on that broadcast regardless.
Well, that's exactly it. You have there's no win here. That contract that they have is so bad, and I know they've been trying to renegotiate it, and I don't know how it's changed over the past year. But in comparison to what they want to be making, the sort of money that they're negotiating in North America, we're talking pennies. We're talking pennies here. So the fact that they even signed a deal right now, or what they have right now as a deal, is simply just to get the UFC on television in Russia. It's not even about making money at that point. But the UFC is on in Russia so late at night anyway. Who's really up watching that unless you have a Khabib? I mean, Khabib was fighting, I think it was 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning, something like that. So nobody's up watching
the kids before they go to school can watch Khabib fight.
Well, that's exactly it. That's the best you got. You're going to wake up early and watch Khabib. But there's a whole fight card full of fighters that they didn't care to see before that. So it's for you to actually go there and present a fight card that's going to be tailored for them. You have to put on a Fight Pass show, like you mentioned. It has to be, because a pay-per-view just generally what means tailored for a North American audience. I understand that they've had exceptions in the UK, etc., but generally it's tailored for a North American audience, and that for the same time zone. And that's a massive issue considering the time difference between. I mean, Russia's massive. Let's just say Moscow and Vegas. It's a massive time difference. It doesn't work out that way. But if you host a Fight Pass show and you stack it with all the Russians and Caucasus fighters that you have on the card, truly stack that card and present a fight card that the fans over there will truly enjoy. Because remember, they get a ton of Russian MMA events generally. That's regional fight cards all the time. So all these fighters that the UFC is going to stack the card with are fighters they're used to. If they put an Alexander Volkov on the top of the card and charge 10 times the amount that M1 charges for a ticket, well, that doesn't make sense considering he's fought for M1 like 10 times possibly. I remember calling 2 or 3 of his fights for M1 Global, and those aren't expensive tickets at all. So people are used to seeing a Volkov, you know what I mean? So you're going to have to stack that card, tailor it for them, keep the prices very, very reasonable, and that's how you start attracting a fan base over there. But they have to do that slowly. You can't just go in and expect that your name is going to suddenly mean that you're going to make money and be successful and that the doors are going to be blown open for an American company in Russia in this current climate. It's just not going to happen. It's honestly, I don't understand the process or how they sort of plan out their schedule or why they're so interested in going to Russia. It's very suspicious to me because there are no good reasons. There's no economic purpose behind this. There is no. It's terrible in the political climate, but yet they still insist. Dana White still says, we're going to Russia. Khabib might fight in the future in Russia. We're still going. He keeps pushing this point as if it's an essential thing for the UFC's business plan, and I don't understand why.
There's got to be some kind of secret behind it. Just quickly, with Khabib, it's interesting. He's got some interesting connections there in Russia, some really powerful people. An oligarch by the name of Magomedov actually paid for his surgery in 2017. Tell us a little bit about his connections to some of these big people and oligarchs in Russia, and the fact that they're sort of, buying him these cars, paying for his surgeries. What's going on there?
The oligarch is a very interesting character because while we've already had a very, very eventful April, it began with the arrest of a man named Ziauddin Magomedov. And now anybody who follows Russian MMA will know the name quite well because this is the man who's funded Fight Nights Global for the past few years. So he's resurrected that promotion from basically death to what it is now, to the fact that they were able to host a Fedor fight just a couple of years ago against Fabio Maldonado. Now, that was all due to Ziauddin Magomedov. He decided to invest in mixed martial arts, believe it or not, as a way to get Putin's attention. Putin, when Dmitry Medvedev left the presidency and Putin won his re-election, Putin reshuffled the cabinet, and not just his cabinet, just the general political and economic elite in Russia, as tends to happen whenever he's re-elected, sort of a shift in the oligarchs. And one of the people who suffered was Ziauddin Magomedov. So he spent quite a few years afterwards building himself up and investing in. He tried to buy shares into the UFC during the Zuffa era, like the Lorenzo Fertitta and Frank Fertitta era, was unsuccessful at the time, and decided to invest instead in Fight Nights Global. Now, during this process, he ended up deciding that he wanted to also become a big tech guy and a big tech oligarch. And that's another great way to get Putin's attention, is innovation in Russia. So what he did was hosted a Fedor's fight against Fabio Maldonado on the same weekend as the St. Petersburg Economic Conference in 2016. I remember this very clearly because I was in Russia a week before the economic forum. I remember the signs being everywhere in the area, and etc. And I could not get the thought out of my head as I was writing the articles that there has to be some link between the two. And I put out the article beforehand that Magomedov might be sort of angling for a meeting with Putin, or sort of to gain Putin's attention by hosting a fight at a time he knows Putin will also be in St. Petersburg. So what happened was, it turned out that he actually did meet. Putin didn't end up attending the show, but he ended up meeting with Putin at the Economic Forum and signing an agreement to bring Hyperloop One, that tube transportation system, to Russia. And the billions started flowing in once more, and he was no longer a diminished oligarch. He was suddenly flourishing again. Now, fast forward to, let's fast forward a year. He decides that he wants to start really funding and investing in Khabib Nurmagomedov, because Khabib is a big star from Dagestan, and this is one of the only oligarchs from Dagestan, so sort of like a brotherly love thing. And generally, there's a history in Russia of oligarchs looking after athletes. It's a way to gain influence. It's a way to sort of, if need be, rehabilitate your image and get the athlete to speak kindly for you. But in this case, it was a way for him to gain more popularity and support from this community and Khabib's fans, etc., which he managed to do for a very good amount of time. He ended up investing in Fight Nights even further, putting in $7 million and opening up Eagles MMA, which was a fight club in Russia that Khabib ended up becoming president of.
Oh, so he opened that up.
He opened that, yes. Like that was all Ziauddin Magomedov's is doing. And Khabib became president and was paid a salary for that. And this is all apparently still occurs right to this day, even though he's in jail now. But what happened was, Khabib, I believe, makes about 50% of his income outside of the UFC, and that all pretty much comes from sponsorships or Ziauddin Magomedov. So you can imagine how significant it was when you wake up on, say, March 31st as Khabib Nurmagomedov starting his weight cut or whatever, or just in the final bit of training camp, and you find out that your financial support in Russia has just been arrested on charges of embezzlement. And Ziauddin Magomedov ended up being arrested March 31st, I believe, or April 1st, so it was one of those two, and has been in jail ever since. And it's believed that he's embezzled $35 billion from the state. And it's a very, very significant sum, and it's believed that it has something to do with his contracts, his Suma Group organization's contracts to construct 2 World Cup stadiums, actually. So again, now we've got some FIFA corruption involved in this as well. And apparently they're not sound structures, or he sort of wasn't using the best material. He wasn't still charging. One of those schemes that I don't understand entirely. But you have to understand that whether true or false, this is clearly a sign that Putin wanted this oligarch out of the way. Again, another reshuffling of the cabinets, once again, a reshuffling of those who are in power. Which is why I found it so surprising that Khabib Nurmagomedov, after his win against Al Iaquinta, takes the microphone from Joe Rogan and goes on a tirade in Russian, asking for Putin to help out Ziauddin Magomedov in his in the criminal charges that he has against him, laid out against him right now.
So that was the stuff that he didn't want to translate. You know, when Joe asked him, he was like, "Oh, what did you say?"
Exactly.
Okay.
Didn't even realize that happened. That's crazy.
Well, I caught it afterwards. I'm thinking, why did he decide he wants to talk in Russian? And then I caught the names. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting. But he basically congratulated Putin on his election win and asked him to help Ziauddin Magomedov. And he said this live on UFC pay-per-view. And he did not want to translate that to Joe Rogan, which I thought was interesting, really, really interesting. But there's no need to nitpick on that specific point. Just the whole the whole scenario was bizarre to me. The fact that Khabib was so taken aback by this that he felt the need to actually broadcast a statement on UFC television. That's very surprising, actually, because he's not usually political in any way like that. That's really not his style. Even if he appears with someone, he does not really make political statements. He does not side with. It's not in Khabib's style at all. He's generally very reserved and keeps his opinions to himself about things like that. So it was very surprising to see him come forward in that sense. But that gives you an example of just the sort of affiliations he has in Russia.
Just really quickly, because we got to let you go, Karim. Just really quickly, wanted to ask. So two things. The fact that Magomedov's in jail, does that mean that all of that financial backing is essentially gone from Khabib now? He's not getting that salary or anything like that, the contribution. I wonder what happens to Eagles MMA. Who's sort of gonna, do they shut shop? Is there someone else that's going to be, taken over as far as, fronting the money? And also, do you know if Khabib has a relationship with Vladimir Putin?
Okay, let's start with the last one.
Sure.
I don't think I think he might have gotten sort of a message of congratulations from Putin, but even that I can't confirm. And other than that, I don't think he has any affiliation whatsoever to Putin. Nothing on the levels of Fedor, at least.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's, you know what? Actually, you have to repeat those other bits again. I completely forgot it.
I was just going to say, the fact that Magomedov's in jail, does that mean Khabib's no longer getting those payments? And do you know what happens to Eagles MMA? If Magomedov was the one paying for that gym to run and operate, what happens now that he's in jail? Does Eagles MMA cease to exist? Do they close the doors? What happens?
As far as I know, even if there was, say, like a rainy day fund somewhere, or that Magomedov had already, say, invested millions that are yet to be spent, that money is going to run dry very soon, including for Eagles MMA, which is still running, but there's not been much media. They've been very, very silent on that end. And here's how I know they're heading towards trouble, is because Fight Night Global has had a massive schedule of international events that they plan to do, including going to Brazil and all sorts of other places. They're already rolling that back, and instead of hosting those events abroad, they're hosting them in Russia, which of course can be understood as a cost-cutting measure, which is essential at the moment. So they're already reaping the repercussions of this sort of Magomedov being in jail. And truth be told, Magomedov's going to be in jail if he gets, of course, found guilty. He's going to be in jail for a minimum of 20 years. So Consider that the absolute end of his affiliation to mixed martial arts. Generally, that's probably the end of that. Whether another oligarch steps in and decides to fund fight nights is going to be very interesting to see. But I don't know what happens to Eagles MMA next, because there's a lot of fighters who relied on that. Very much like Kadyrov pays the stipends in Ahmed MMA for these fighters to train full-time. Very much like how KHK MMA has Prince Khaled doing the exact same thing in Bahrain. This was a very similar situation where the fighters were fighting full-time and were paid to do so by Ziauddin Magomedov and had their medical bills covered, etc. So in many ways, it was a good system for the handful of fighters who were allowed to participate in that. Khabib, on the other hand, is a very interesting situation. While his financial support from Magomedov is going to have to end at some point, if it hasn't already. I can't confirm if it has. There's going to be, I truly believe that somebody's going to step in, because now you have a vacuum there, a power vacuum, truly, because whoever supports Khabib wields a lot of influence now in Russia, in the sense that this is a very popular celebrity in Russia, and very popular in Muslim communities, so you can use them in a lot of different ways. And this doesn't necessarily have to be malicious or use in a negative way. But the idea is that Khabib is so popular that there's going to be another oligarch who's going to want to step in and support him. So that's going to be something to watch out for in the next few months.
Man, well, there you guys go. A big business opportunity in Russia. If you're listening and you've got a few billion floating around, why not invest in Khabib Nurmagomedov? The time is right. Make sure to also follow Zidan, Karim Zidan on Twitter at Zidan Sports. Quickly, Karim, a couple of things people want to look out for that's coming up. I know I read your fantastic article about the WWE and their greatest Royal Rumble show and why they went up to Saudi Arabia, which was very, very interesting to read. Anything that people need to look out for that's coming out in the near future?
Well, if in case our little section discussing Michael Cohen and Fedor's ties to Trump and Putin was a little confusing to follow, I will actually be posting an article explaining all this and Michael Cohen's involvement in mixed martial arts and how it all ties back to his current predicament with the FBI in the next few days on Bloody Elbow. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out on. And I've got a few more interesting articles in the pipeline as well, actually. There's a few more articles about the rise of fascism in mixed martial arts. Unfortunately, it's happening in places like Poland and Germany. Ramzan Kadyrov is getting his sorry, on a side note, because it's not the fascism, but Ramzan Kadyrov is also getting much more involved in Western European countries than we should be comfortable with, and that's something I'm keeping an eye out on as well. But on a lighter note, I'm also writing about Sharice Davids, who's actually a woman running for Congress right now, a Native American. If she wins, she becomes the first Native American to actually win a seat in Congress. And well, obviously that's not the significant part to us, but the fact is that she actually was an amateur and professional mixed martial artist as well. And tried out for the Ultimate Fighter for the year that they actually had the strawweights, the women's strawweight tournament and title. And she got very close to winning. And had she actually, no, not close to winning, but close to actually getting onto the show. Had she got onto the show, it would have been very interesting that her trajectory, her whole life trajectory would have changed entirely, from her going into politics now, becoming a White House fellow during the Obama-Trump transition, and going now running for Congress. She would have instead have been an MMA fighter full time. So I think that was a fascinating story for me. I've already spoken to her. I'm in the process of writing it now, and it's nice to occasionally write a feel-good story for a change. You guys know I'm not exactly known for that.
And probably lucky that she didn't get onto the show then, Karim?
Well, I mean, at times like this, we need people like her running for office. We need more people deciding that politics is something they want in their life. This is not a time for us to forget and to ignore it. Absolutely not in this world we live in.
Well, there you go, man. Dude, I can't wait to read a lot of that stuff. That sounds really, really great, especially the one on Michael Collin. I'm really fascinated by this. So it's good to see that you've got a lot of interesting things coming up. Of course, again, don't forget to follow the man on Zidan Sports. And Karim, we always really appreciate you jumping on the program, giving us your time. We've been speaking for a while. We could speak to you all day. There's literally I think we've covered 50% of the topics that we actually had. So we'll definitely get you on again, and hopefully a lot sooner. And yeah, we really, really appreciate you sharing these stories and, giving us this insight, because really, who else are we going to come to? There's no one else that can really, not only give us the insight that you do, but deliver it in such a great way. And people always say they love your natural storytelling ability, man. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure, guys, as always. You know me. I'll be back on this show anytime you ask.
And there you guys go. Karim Zidan. Great to have him on the program. We like to call him Karim the Dream here on Submission Radio, Casper, and it's because he is such a good dude. We've known the guy for a really, really long time. He's always been working super hard when it comes to his writing, always sort of looking into interesting areas that people missed out on, and always working really hard to get the facts together. And right now, I mean, the work that he's doing is just unbelievable.
Just quickly, fun little story, fun little tidbit, fun fact about Karim at Submission Radio. When we first started, before we were even part of SB Nation, obviously, we do a whole bunch of interviews. This is like 2014, and you know what I mean? Like we'd make the rounds and stuff like that. Karim was the guy on Bloody Elbow, not to take any credit away from anybody else, like, Kid Nate Wilcox, or anyone else, but he was pretty much the guy who would always do the articles on our work. And I guess in a lot of ways, we owe him a big debt of gratitude, because pretty much whatever interview we did, we could always count on Karim to do an article about that interview and make some headlines and, give us a presence on Bloody Elbow, which really, really, really helped us, in the beginning, so to get our footing. So there you go. Karim, he's almost like an unofficial partner. He can take a lot of credit for the success of Submission Radio and where it is today. Because if we didn't get those articles, if we didn't get our name out there and, get those interviews out there, we wouldn't be the platform that we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Karim's a great guy. Gives young people an opportunity. Gave us an opportunity. I know he works with a lot of young people everywhere. So he's just a great dude who, doesn't have to help, but, will help people out. And his writing right now is just unbelievable. The stuff that he's exposing, the areas that he's looking in. I mean, this guy deserves your follow on Twitter. It's a different aspect of MMA. He's got the political aspect of things. He reports on things in Russia, which a lot of people are honestly afraid to report on because of security issues and
it's high risk stuff that he does.
It's high risk stuff. It's not, not putting anyone down, but it's not reporting when, Conor McGregor is going to be fighting Khabib next. This is
not what we do. Our interviews are easy.
It's not like us. It's not like us. We get scared instantaneously, but this guy is going deep in the underground of the goings on in Russia, brings light to a bunch of different stuff, and stands up for what he believes. And so jump on Twitter, give him a follow just to see something different pop up on your Twitter feed. It's well worth it. Now, guys, before we wrap up, we've got to mention a couple of things. First of all, Casper, the Avengers. I saw the Avengers. I'm going to do a quick review. Before I do the review, I just want to mention to everybody, Christian, our videographer, our Submission Radio videographer, close friend. You guys might have seen him. He does and covers events with us. So much great content, so much great work. He's actually the funniest guy. We love hanging out with him. We love to just sit around and talk pop culture and we have so many inside jokes. We could go into it for years and years and years. But basically, this guy is a movie fanatic, and he has, almost an encyclopedia worth amount of knowledge in his mind when it comes to movies. He was doing this thing on his Facebook page where he was sort of creating polls to see which movie was better, which was the best movie from the 90s, and he got a lot of traction. So what he decided to do was create his own page. It's called Box Office Royale with Cheese. You guys can check it out on Facebook right now. What's happening right now, speaking of brackets, speaking of tournaments, speaking of predictions, I mean, this is very exciting. Right now, the 80s movie greatness bracket is coming to an end. It's Back to the Future versus Die Hard. I don't know if you guys are going to have the ability to jump on right now and vote because voting is happening right now, but jump on there, like Box Office Royale with Cheese, and if you have an opportunity, poll to see which is the greatest movie of the 80s, Back to the Future or Die Hard. Now, mind you, this all started with a bunch of movies to begin with. Movies like Coming to America, Good Morning Vietnam, Scarface, 48 Hours, The Untouchables, Predators. The list goes on, and it'll dwindle down to these last two finalists. You guys can be a part of this process. It's a polling process. I won't lie. Hearts get broken. If you go on there, you can see me with my personal Facebook page complaining that certain movies aren't going through. Imploring people to vote for certain movies just so at least they lose with a more respectable percentage. Jump on this right now. Campaigning so the royal wedding stops being on TV. Guys, Box Office Royale with Cheese on Facebook. We can't recommend it enough. And the cool thing about it is it's just something different. You can be a part of the poll. Christian and the page, they're very reactive. They respond to your comments. They give you your thoughts. And there's no such thing. Look, there's a little bit of banter. You'll also notice a lot of big names from the MMA community being involved here as well, because obviously we're all friends across all the different websites. So you might even be able to rub shoulders with some of the biggest names in MMA. If you jump on there, give it a like, and get into the discussion. I think he's got some big things coming up next.
There's going to be awesome themes like best horror movie, best action movie, best. It's not just genres by decades. There's going to be heaps and heaps. And the thing I like about it is it's so easy and it's simple. You see a little poll pop up in your feed. There's two movies. You pick one. That's it. It's that simple. And then the bracket continues and you see who wins in the end. So it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so I'm just on the page now, and I think the finale is over. You won't be able to vote on the 80s movie. It looks like Back to the Future beat Die Hard, 62% to 38%. If that makes your blood boil, all right? If that makes your blood boil, if you can't stand this, you have to make a difference. It takes a good man to do nothing for evil to prevail. So, Box Office Royale with Cheese, jump on there, like the page, and become a part of the next voting process. I think you mentioned Casper, greatest horror movies. There's also the greatest superhero movies of all time. I mean, there's going to be some big stuff there. And if you see me and Casper in there, don't be surprised. Some big names from the MMA world rub shoulders, rub elbows. Get in there. Give your thoughts. This is very important to us. Make sure to like Christian. Maybe we'll get him on the show one day, get his thoughts. He's got a bit of a, this is a guy that takes his movies seriously. When I say I like a movie, he basically just disrobes me, dismantles me, takes me apart piece by piece. Like Kevin Bacon taking apart his weapon in Bodyguard, which I love that movie. Kevin Costner, what am I saying? So make sure to jump on the page and like it. Now, quickly, speaking of reviews, Casper, the Avengers, no spoilers. It's a spoiler-free zone here. We love Covington. We love having him on the show, but we don't support the spoilers. Just quickly, my thoughts on the movie. This is a huge movie. This movie is a huge deal. I just have to say this. When you watch this movie and you go into this movie, I mean, this isn't a spoiler. You can see this anywhere. The movie goes for almost 3 hours. When you go into this movie, just expect to see something different. from the perspective of this thing has been building for 10 years' time. They've got 1 billion superheroes they've got to fit into this almost 3-hour period. Expect something different. It definitely feels like, something that's been built for 10 years. It feels like something special. When you watch it, the amount of action heroes, the amount of superheroes, the amount of movies being brought together, it's a spectacular sight. You just can't deny the fact that, all right, it's pretty crazy that all these dudes are in one place. It feels different. It feels much bigger than the normal Avengers movies. It feels like something special. So from that perspective, you definitely got to check it out. From the perspective of whether or not I like the movie, look, it goes for a really long time. I respect the fact that in this movie, unlike other movies that are kind of bridge movies, they try and get their shit in. So that's why they got the 2 hours and 40 minutes. They don't want this movie just to finish on a random note. They want to squeeze as much in as they can. They've got a lot of dialogue from different superheroes to put in there. The problem, of course, is when you have so many big superheroes, guys with different characters, and you don't have the writers that you usually do for the normal movies that they're on, you do kind of get moments where superheroes seem, I suppose, unauthentic. You get certain lines that seem like they're written for those heroes, unlike something that would be organically said. In those situations, it's kind of tough. You kind of do notice them, and you kind of go, I don't know if they'd say that, or I think the writing's a little bit off here. But what can you say? You're trying to get everyone together. Some of my superhero favorites in this movie are Spider-Man, Iron Man, Doctor Strange. I think they've done an amazing job. Bruce Banner, I don't know how I feel about him in this movie. Check it out for yourself. A bit of a flip-flop here and there. All in all, I have to give the movie 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. Initially,
that's pretty high. You're a harsh critic.
Initially, on my Facebook page, I gave 2.5 mustaches. I went back and watched it again.
Wow. Yeah, did you take like a week off work to do this? That's like 6 hours. Jesus.
6 hours with ads. You're looking at a day's worth of work. I watched it with 2 different people, and I give it that. Side note, sidebar, before we wrap up, I go and watch it for the first time. I take, Ash, my girlfriend Ash. Difficult to get her into a movie to begin with, terrible taste in movies, super just a tough person to be with. I've been with her for 6 years, and it's just, sometimes it drags on. Thanks for watching the show, Ash. But she doesn't watch it anyway, so she won't find out till a few months from now. We're having problems in our relationship. No, I'm kidding. We have a good relationship. But, okay, here's what happened. I go into the movie cinema. It's a packed cinema. Everybody's excited. The dudes around the corner to the side of us, 3 or 4 gentlemen, they're sitting there, they're talking, it's all fine. The movie starts. Now, these guys are talking, and they're not whispering, Casper. They're full-on talking.
Motherfuckers.
And I'm like really excited for this movie. I watched this last week after we recorded our episode.
Were you like George Costanza, where he's being a new man, and then he stands up, and he's like, and if you think I won't, you just try me.
Well, exactly. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I do the half turn with a look. I do the full turn with a look. These guys don't care. I go back to the movie. In my head, when someone's talking in the cinema, you're like, it's bothering you, and you can't focus on the movie.
Yeah.
My blood is starting to boil. And Ash goes, oh man, these guys just won't stop talking. That's enough. So I turn around and I try to point to the guy that's talking. He won't look at me. So I point to his friend, and I get him to tap the guy that's talking on the shoulder. And I have my finger over my mouth. So I'm trying to be respectful, and I'm just trying to give him a little bit of a shush, give a bit of a bit of a shh. But then this guy that's talking in the cinema. Now this guy, he goes, what? He goes, what to me?
He just crossed the line.
It was unbelievable. I was trying to be nice.
No,
so I go from shh to be quiet.
Well, he asked. He
sits back down, quiet for the rest of the movie.
It was like Johnny Drama in Entourage, where the guy gets up to pee and Johnny Drama's got the towel in his head, and he's like, sit down. Then everyone just goes quiet.
This is where it's funny, because there's a kid in my row. He's trying to ask his dad a question. Now, his dad heard the be quiet.
He crossed the line as well.
People were on edge. So as soon as the kid's like, oh, Dad, blah, blah, blah. He's like, shh. Keep it down. Don't upset this guy right here. He's obviously on the edge. So, look, but apart from that, it was an enjoyable experience. I hope people can check it out and give us their thoughts in the comment section below. And I guess that's the episode for today, Kat. You haven't seen the Avengers yet, have you?
I haven't seen it. I tried. My girlfriend came from Brisbane. She's interstate. She came for like the weekend. And I was like, listen, I was trying to pitch it to her. Got shot down in flames, like Black Hawk Down, just crashed. So no Avengers for me. And I think it's shit because I think at this point most people, you've seen it already. Most people have seen it. So it's like, what do I do? Who do I go? I'm not gonna go see it by myself. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just wait till it comes out. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe I can coax you into seeing it a third time. Maybe you can waste 9 hours of your life. I don't know.
Unbelievable. I have to say, though, the ads as well, 30 minutes. We'll have to talk about that on a different episode. It's getting too long. We have to get someone on from Village. We have to get on someone on from Hoyts. We need to sort them out. This is the royal wedding.
I smell another rant, like the wedding rant, the royal wedding.
30 minute, yeah, it's all getting too much. I'm still upset by the guy talking in the cinema. Can you guys see? Is it clear? Anyway, big thanks to all our guests on Submission Radio this week. Big thanks to you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode of Submission Radio next week. Have a great week and party on.